councillors and visitors and staff. I'll declare the meeting of the Growth and Infrastructure Committee open. Apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Young. Do we have any other apologies? Oh, from Mark?
I've got to leave at 3 to catch a plane.
Three to catch a plane, and James is leaving for about an hour at 2:30. So if we can note them down, Amy. Sorry, can we... Councillor Gallagher, can you take your discussions outside, please? Okay. I wonder where the noise was coming from. Okay, so I'll move that apologies be accept the second of James. Those in favour, against, carried. Thanks. Councillors, for confirmation of the agenda, you've got a run sheet in the blue shading there, and we have changed the order here. So, with your approval, we're bringing up item 13, partly because Councillor Bunting has to leave early, and we want to make sure he's there for that, having chaired the group that worked on it. And item 8, we're going to have slotted at 11:15. I plan to make the morning tea break finish then, so we can go straight into the presentation from Waikato Regional Council passenger transport section, so that it's sort of more efficient for them. But apart from that, the order is at the moment as stated here, as long as you give us a bit of flexibility to move things around to meet those other requirements I've mentioned. So I'll move that the agenda be adopted as on the sheet, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Those in favour, against, that's carried. Thanks. Any declarations of interest? No. Public forum. We've got 2 public forum speakers. Sarah Greenwood is the first one. Hi Sarah, how are you? She's there with Robin. Would you like to come up to the seat at the end of the table facing us there with Robin? Sarah will explain in detail what she's here about, but approximately 3 minutes plus questions will be fine. And Sarah was talking in relation to the Gordonton Road, Thomas Road intersection and some of the issues that she saw firsthand very recently there.
Yes.
So Sarah, the floor is yours, and we'll go to questions afterwards.
Okay. I thought I'd talk a little bit about my experience and how seeing this accident made me feel sort of at the time and for a few days afterwards, rather than talking too much about the women who were involved in the crash, because they're not here today. So I wanted to be a little bit respectful. I was driving on the Friday the 14th. I'd left work. I had my very sick 2.5-year-old daughter in the back of the car with me. And I was driving along Thomas Road and I was turning left into Gordonton Road when 2 cars collided at, I assume, pretty high speed from the damage to the vehicle. I sat there for a minute in shock, as did most other people, I think. Nobody left their cars for a little while, and eventually made the decision to get out and see if the people in the car closest to me were okay. There was, in terms of the wreckage, I was having to pick my way through the road with my shoes. I was wearing ballet flats, so they weren't very thick cushioning on the soles, and there's just bits of stuff everywhere. So you often see that when you drive along anyway, if you've seen the aftermath of an accident, but I hadn't realised quite how much debris there'd be. I went to the car and was very worried about what I was going to see when I approached it, because the whole front of the car, mainly the passenger side, was very caved in, and the passenger side wheel was crushed up sort of and tucked underneath the car somewhat, and looked like it would be perhaps where the footwell is. The passenger door was also no longer this length and was sort of something more like this length in some pretty jagged shapes, but wouldn't open. And the women in the car were both conscious but didn't look to be in great shape, and I couldn't see the legs because of where the dashboard had come right up. At the time, I was quite afraid of what I would see when I arrived at the vehicle, and what sort of shape the people would be in. I was also afraid of what might happen to my daughter left in my vehicle on her own. Even though we were some way back from the intersection, there was a fear that there'd be somebody, you know, driving and not thinking and coming into the back of our car and then hurting her. I certainly felt my adrenaline kick in when I was there at the scene, and all I could do was to comfort the passenger and to stroke her arm where there wasn't any blood, and tell her that it was going to be okay, that emergency services were going to be on their way. And then thankfully, a plain car arrived and put blue and red lights on, and I think he was probably a police officer, but he did a sweep of the vehicle and made sure that there was no petrol coming out or anything leaking, so there was no further danger to anyone immediately nearby. And then he got a first aid kit out of his car, and at that point I made the decision to go back to my daughter, so I left the scene and went back to her. When I drove away, I was so shaky that I had to pull the car over because I didn't feel that I could drive safely, and I had to calm myself down. And when I did, I was then able to leave. I was very tearful, both then and for several days after the accident. It was not a nice thing to witness, and I felt guilty, and I cried. And then for a few days later, I felt very upset about it all. I felt immense guilt that I couldn't have done more for them, and that I had chosen my daughter over staying with the ladies in the car. I had flashbacks. Excuse me. I had flashbacks for quite a few days after of their faces. But thankfully, they are both okay, which has really helped with my ability to get through this. We've been in communication on and off, and they've been able to update me about how they're doing and how they're healing, and that kind of thing, which has been great. So, I think that's perhaps all I have to say on that.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Sarah. We appreciate you coming along and that you were there and helped. Open the floor to questions. Have I got any questions? Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting. Sorry. Okay. Heather.
Hi.
Councillor Mark.
Oh, I think James was first.
And, okay.
Yeah, I think I'm there.
I'm sorry, that way around. Yep. James, go.
Right. Hey, thank you, Sarah, for coming along. Look, even crash scenes can be even scary places for seasoned police officers to turn up at. You know, you never know what you're going to see. The people that were injured, were they the ones pulling out of Thomas Road?
Whilst I turned to see the cars hit each other, I couldn't tell you who was coming from which direction. I saw the impact that happened sort of, so I was turning left into Gordonton, and there's a series of cars, there's about 4 cars in front of me that were turning right into Gordonton, and I couldn't get through to the front of that intersection because it narrows. So I couldn't see whether it was somebody coming out of Thomas, and I've not discussed it with the victims that were in the accident because I haven't wanted to re-victimise them or bring attention to something that might make them feel really bad. So perhaps we'll get to that when we meet in person.
Okay, all right. No, it's and look, thanks for stopping and helping those people. In your opinion, something has to be done about this intersection
Yes, absolutely.
sooner rather than later?
Yeah. I wouldn't want... I mean, my experience is absolutely nothing in comparison to what these women went through in the car, and I don't know about the driver of the other car, I really don't, but if I feel this awful from just witnessing it, I dread to think how awful they must feel having been in it and having to have surgery and healing. The healing process of bones is going to be weeks and months.
A fatal motor accident costs around about $4 million each one, and a serious motor accident like that where you got injuries because of loss of productivity and everything else can run into the hundreds of thousands just for one accident.
Sure.
So thanks for coming along.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. Mark.
Very much. I said thank you for your bravery. first of all, and for coming and doing this. This is something that not many people would do, so you're getting right to the heart of it. You've done great, thank you, really appreciate that. Do you still use that intersection, and if you do, how do you've avoided it now?
Yeah, it's just, I think I don't want to tempt fate at this stage, and given time, I'll probably go back to using it again.
Right.
But right now, I'm avoiding it.
Are you aware there's been another ding since?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Right, thank you.
Thanks. Leo, thanks.
Pardon me. Sarah, you said that the damage to the vehicle turning out of Thomas Road was on the left-hand side?
I don't know where either of the vehicles were coming from. I couldn't say whether they were coming into or out of Thomas Road at all. I just saw the impact happen and then the vehicles bounce off each other.
I thought you said that the left-hand side of the vehicle
coming
from Thomas Road was the one which was severely damaged when you arrived
Yes.
on the scene.
Yeah, so
Yep.
the passenger side of the vehicle was the worst damage. So
Sure.
I guess if you understand how crashes work, maybe you could take something from the direction that the cars were going.
So would that mean then that the vehicle which hit that vehicle coming out of Thomas Road would have been coming from that driver's left, or in other words, from the Gordonton end?
Sorry, Leo, I think Sarah said she didn't know whether it was coming out of Thomas Road or in another direction.
Yeah.
She knows it was hit on the left side, but not where it was coming from.
It was mainly the whole front of the car was squashed in, but the worst side of it was the passenger side.
Okay, all right. Have you had any counselling since this?
I have, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. Really
Okay.
appreciate you coming along. Robin's here because she's been doing some work with Sarah and with some of the councillors, which is going to come up later in the meeting in the staff reports about what action we're suggesting in that area. So thank you very
Okay,
much,
thank
Sarah.
you for listening.
Appreciate.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Okay, next, councillors, we've got Jenny Gallagher and Max Vernon from talking about Baverstock Road, which is also coming up later there. So Jenny and Max, if you'd like to come forward. Angela and I are wondering whether you've done the baking for the meeting, Jenny. Oh. Jenny's hosted 2 meetings at least up there with put on so much food that I think people would have been eating till the next day before they could leave.
I was just going to say, somebody, took leftovers.
Angela brought me in a doggy bag from the first meeting, that's for sure. Anyway, Jennifer, thanks very much for coming along, and with Max, both residents in the immediate vicinity of the area we're talking about. So the floor is yours, and there's approximately 3 minutes for some questions afterwards.
Oh, probably, thanks, David. Probably just to reiterate what we discussed at our earlier meeting, that with the advent of the expressway going through, there's a greater volume of traffic heading up and down Baverstock Road, because those people coming from Te Kowhai and the rural areas around there, it's a bit blocked off if they're heading to Te Rapa. And of course the other problem we have is the speed that's been experienced going down the road, and Jason sort of let us know at our last meeting that the top speed of a vehicle travelling down Baverstock Road, which at that area is 70 k's, was 130 k. So it is a concern to parents with young children and pedestrians that are heading up to the zoo, that they've got speeds of that sort of magnitude happening up and down the road.
The people that are walking to the zoo, of course, are having to use the, having to use the road to get up there, especially in the winter time, because the footpaths, the grassed areas around us are so wet and soggy, and the grass is quite long. And then when the grass isn't long, all the mowed, what do you call it? Debris left behind, all the grasses, clippings are left behind. So 99% of the people walking along Baverstock Road have to use the road in front of our areas anyway, and further down, and you see them as, it'll be Skittles one day. It's, because so many people walk, run and exercise their dogs around there, it's, that speed is just lethal.
And of course the other consideration is that with a bus stop both sides of the road outside well, the bus heading down the road has to stop on my driveway, and the one heading up just parks on the boom. So you may have seen the mugshot in the paper showing the bus coming up the road with very little area for anyone else to meet it. But if it's parked and with passengers getting on and off, of course, you know, it's a traffic management hazard and just another safety aspect that we'd like to see fixed. And, you know, we are very grateful that council have come back to say that in the short term there will be a temporary footpath and off carriageway bus space, which will be added safety feature for us. So thanks for that.
Temporary street lighting.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We're getting some lighting.
We are going to get some lighting, so
Yeah.
all these things help.
They do, and we are very grateful. But the other thing is, as we suggested at our last meeting, it needs to be a 50k, not a 60k, as was tossed around. 50's no good. I mean, 60's no good. It's just, you know, like you have at the end of the road, you have a 50k sign, and how far down to the next 200? No.
Oh, no, it's Fairway. It's right down by past Lloyd Drive.
Yeah,
it's a
so then
Fairway.
you've got the 70, then you've got a 50. So no point having 50, 60, 50. You know, you might just keep continuality, you know, right through, and hopefully people get the hang of speeding.
So
Going
there's,
with speed.
can I ask the clarification, there's 50 on both sides of you, but where you are in the middle, the top stretch of Baverstock, it's 70.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. So it's just not, it's not feasible at all. It's dangerous, and you know, if you drop it to 60, that's 10 k's. Well, people are going to think, what the hell? Let's go. Is that 130? Well, I'm pretty sure there'd be more than one up there at over the 100 k's going down that road anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, that's our battle. I think we've expressed our opinions on more than one occasion. So yeah, we're still fighting for it.
Thanks very much. I've got a question from Councillor James.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny and Max. And to put emphasis on it, when you invited the councillors around and put on that beautiful meal and everything else, I don't know how much you paid that Holden driver when both Jeff and myself came out, but there's nothing more to get a councillor's attention than trying to kill him. Because when
Did somebody try and hit you?
not trying, I don't know how much you paid them, but there was a crappy old Holden that ripped up the road at about 100k past us. Sorry, crappy.
Let's not go forward.
It could have been a
Carl.
Ford.
Or
You sure it wasn't a
yeah.
Ford?
Sorry,
Okay.
I'll write by a crappy new Holden. And but he came past at about 100 miles an hour past us, and that certainly got our attention. You probably didn't notice it.
Happened to you too, Ziggy, when you left the first time, eh? Because I thought, come in the door, yeah.
So, James, there was a question in that, was there?
Yes. Who was the driver?
You like the driving skills? We don't do that. Remember where we work.
Oh.
Okay, Councillor
So
Mark.
50
Oh,
cars.
sorry.
Point
Oh, you were
forward.
objecting to the crappy old Holden, were you? So, Max and Jennifer, would it be fair to say that you're happy enough with the interim measures the staff are proposing, except you also want the speed limit in
Yeah.
that area reduced?
Yeah. We're really happy with the proposal that come back to us. Very grateful for that. But the suggestion was 60, and no. As I said, we had, for those who weren't here, we did have a few 50k's on road signs in the house just to suggest that that they remember where we were at. So yeah, 50k's is a.
Okay, thanks. So I've got the last question from Paula, thanks.
Thank you. I'm not actually sure if I'm asking the question of you, and sorry I couldn't attend your meetings, but you were in good hands. Were there any traffic calming measures? Because we could drop the speed to 50, and I.
There's been 3 fatals on that road.
Yes, I know.
Is that what you mean?
No, traffic calming, like no, she can't. Speed cushions, that kind of thing.
It's not wide enough. You know, is it?
No.
How you know how wide
It's,
it is?
it's barely 6 metre carriageway.
Oh, yeah, no, I drive up there to when I'm
Yeah.
planting at Lake Waiwhakariki and what have you, which is
Oh, yeah.
stunning.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right about that small stretch. I just wondered whether, because you're going to have to change people's behaviour. They're used to really, as you say, going hell for leather up there, aren't they?
It's nicely put.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it's got that that corner in it. Well, it's not a corner; it's an adjustment. You know, like it doesn't matter. It's
Comes
got-
here, rises and turns slightly
Yeah.
right.
Okay, well, I guess
So,
we'll
yeah.
discuss
We
that
are
when we
going to
come to
discuss
the item.
that,
but
that
yeah,
particular
thank you.
intersection later.
Just
Yeah.
remember 50s, otherwise I could have put 50 signs in here, you know. It was
Yeah,
suggested I bring them.
look, Paula, Chris just telling me there are some traffic calming physical measures that we can discuss later as well.
I was just asking the.
Yeah,
There's
there's nothing there now.
No, I know, I'm aware. Thank you anyway. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jennifer and Max.
Thanks.
Appreciate you coming again.
Okay, thanks, David. And just don't forget the long-term plan. We've still got curb and channel and permanent footpath that we're looking forward to.
We'll be looking forward to you coming and submitting again, and to a preliminary meeting with lots of food.
What did Ross say to you when you said this is our last meeting? He said, you're right, it is. Yeah.
He's trying to range, they see.
No, definitely.
Jimmy's a brilliant cook.
Okay.
No,
that's great.
East don't do it our way, eh?
See, councillors, traffic management can be fun.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks. Look, councillors, we're going to move on with the agenda. We don't need to move a motion to... No. Okay. So we're firstly on to the item 5, the minutes of the 20th of June. That's on page 6. So are there any adjustments or queries on those minutes? If not, have you got a question, Siggy? Oh, sorry, Angela.
I'm using the
sorry, my
thingy.
apologies.
Just on page 11, just following up the top there, I added to the motion that we write to the Minister of Health, Honourable Jonathan Coleman. I'm just wondering if that box has been ticked. That was expressing our displeasure at the lengthy delay the Alcohol Regulatory Authority was taking to make decisions. We were writing a letter.
I signed so many letters. I need to get back to you, Councillor.
Okay, that's okay.
But no, I will actually follow that up now because I think I have seen something. I can't remember when though.
Okay, that's okay.
Angela, I can report that I saw a draft of it.
Oh, okay,
but
good.
I don't know whether it
Councillor.
actually went.
Yeah, I need to follow that up,
Okay.
Councillor.
That's okay, as long as it's in train. And then page 17, and I should have picked this up last week when we, under the Hamilton to Auckland passenger rail, just under B there, it said that we agree to advise the Regional Transport Committee that we wish to develop and agree an advocacy plan, hang on, which relates to, sorry, am I reading the right bit? Before, we ticked off the Waikato plan last week, but before that, I'm reading this as we wanted to ensure that a part of that plan was changed
I don't think
prior to implementing Action 2.2 of the Waikato plan, but I didn't.
I didn't think it was changing the plan. I think it was doing something in advance of implementing that part of the plan which related to
Okay.
how we were going to push forward the rail. Was to
Okay.
do some advocacy before we started doing the other work.
Okay, that's okay. All right.
Which is a bit convoluted English there,
Yeah,
but it does.
okay. No, that's all good. Thank you.
Okay. Siggy, thanks.
Yep, I just got a phone call from one of the people that spoke at the public forum, and it was Philip Head, and he just wondered what
Which
it.
page? Sorry,
Sorry, so I'm talking about page 8. But I'm talking actually about page 9 because of the Harrowfield Drive petition, and I'm just wondering what was meant by giving petitions have no standing under the RMA. So, although they made a petition, it really won't make any difference in the outcome. What does it mean?
Yeah, that was discussed at that meeting though, Siggy.
Yeah.
So I think the question is whether it's correctly recorded on. As far as the act,
Yeah.
what they were saying, and Brendan might want to add something, I suppose, is that it's got no status,
No
legal
status. Okay. Yeah, okay. No legal status.
Is it-
I just want to because I sent him the minute, or he got the minutes, and he just wanted to clarify. So I'm clarifying for him.
I mean, whether we give it status of another sort is up to us.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's got
No,
part
yeah,
of the
okay.
RMA. No.
Okay. Thank you, just a clarification. Thank you.
So are there any other questions or queries? Paula, sorry.
No, that's fine. Just on that, my understanding, the comment was that it had no status under the Resource Management Act, but that didn't include other Local Government Act provisions. So that was just in terms of the consent, because it had already been limited notified. So because it was limited notified, that petition wasn't from those people that could be notified, didn't have any status. That's how I understood it. But anyway, I guess before Ziggy talks to the people concerned, that she might get some clarity on that, just from...
Well, I think certainly Luke would be happy to talk with that about how it technically works, but the petition never came to council, it was withdrawn. Well, it did come to council, never came to this to one of these meetings. It was withdrawn by the petitioners
because they were told that it would have no status.
Yeah, no RMA status, but whether they understood the difference between that and LGA
and
status.
their democratic right to talk to us. Yeah, that's right.
Yep. Okay, any other questions or comments on the minutes? If not, I'll move them as a true and correct record. Seconded by Councillor James. Any discussion? Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thanks very much. We're on to item 6, the Chair's report on page 18, which I'll just go to. So firstly, just comments there on traffic safety issues, which we can discuss if we like, but they're really a follow-on from the public forum presentations. The second one is conference attendance, and just one correction, where it talks about the Australian Smart Cities and Infrastructure Conference, it should read in Melbourne, not in Sydney. That's for... And it's year 2017, Gary. Oh, is it different microbreweries? The CEO tells us he's studied them. Okay, so look, I'll take questions on any part of the report, and then we'll move through it. The second part needs a decision. So if there's any, sorry, I'll look at the board. That helps, Gary.
System that still works.
Yeah, well, this hides it, you see.
I
want it up on my screen here.
Like a kid with too much screen time. Okay, on page 20, you talked about a meeting you had on the corner regarding the boy races and girl races. And some of them were at the meeting, I understand.
Yes.
Did they speak at all?
Yeah, they did. 2 of their representatives spoke
so
publicly.
Do they accept they're breaking the law?
They said it's those Aucklanders, that they used another word in front of Aucklanders, that come down. They put the contention that several hundred Auckland boy races and girl races presumably come down and cause the problems and are not accountable. They also said there were some from the Bay of Plenty, and we'd earlier heard how Tauranga's got a rule that with a curfew involved, and because of the curfew over there, quite a few of theirs are coming over here, allegedly.
And you think that was credible?
So they were saying we don't agree with what they're doing. So it was hard to tell the facts of the situation, but they were all local Hamilton and nearby.
So you think that was credible, what they were saying?
Well, they certainly backed it up with as much evidence they could, and spoke with people afterwards, and it certainly seemed to be some truth in that. And there were some of the police there were saying, yes, at least some of them are from Auckland. They didn't put numbers on them. But part of the problem is that we probably had the ones that are more willing to engage with the community, and they apologised for the mayhem that had been happening, and the rubbish that had been thrown out, and the bit of violence that had happened. So
you say there were some possible solutions were discussed. Can you remember what those were?
Well, the things involved, one of them is partly in place now. It's a lockable gate with an arm, because there's only one property down this particular road, and it stops them using the full area of the pad, if you like. There's some police intelligence type operations that could be swung into action a bit more, so the police are out there earlier when the congregations start happening. But the one that I talked about with Waikato District, or they asked me about actually, was would this council join with them and with Waipa in a joint bylaw that prevented use of public roads for that sort of burnout activity, and that we all had the same one. So at the moment we're that's in Waikato District where this thing is happening, but a lot of these people have been pushed out of the Te Rapa Strait in the city, pushed to the outside, and if you stop that then they go somewhere else, was the thinking. So if we all had the same bylaw, and
But why do you need a bylaw when, I assume they are breaking the law, the road laws or whatever they're called, the road code or something like that.
It's possibly a moot point if you're doing a burnout in an intersection and you're not breaking the speed limit. I don't know, Leo might know more on something like that.
There must be something about reckless driving or unsafe driving, all that sort of stuff, yeah.
There is.
What's
Sustained loss of traction.
So can we just, sustained loss of traction. But look, the police seem to be short-staffed there, though they certainly had a lot there at the meeting, and they're not able to respond quickly enough. Is the upshot really? The police do attend these, and they do impound cars and things like that, but it's not actually stopping it, and it's coming along after the problems have started happening. It was what was reported to the meeting.
Were there any situations where people had this issue had been had occurred in other places and people had found a solution?
Well, yes, and that was the Tauranga one. Was a solution for them, but
which was they send them to Hamilton, was it? Yeah.
Well, they didn't deliberately do that, I don't think, but they certainly reported that the incidents. They put a curfew on some local areas through a bylaw after between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m, and that seemed to have moved the problem on and solved it for the Tauranga people in that area. And that was one of the things that Waikato District was going to look at. Because there's particular problems in their area, they were going to have their staff go off and do some work. And I know that Jason Harrison, our transport manager, has gone off to talk to their transport manager about what might be done with a view to bringing it back well before Christmas here. Okay. That's as far as I got involved at that time.
Okay, so do we have a work stream, or is it
in the hands of our management, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
we haven't
kind of
got a resolution
outside our jurisdiction a bit, isn't it?
Sorry?
Is it outside our jurisdiction? It is
by about 80 metres.
Oh no, it's not.
Sorry.
Territory-wise, I mean in terms of, the police does this stuff, the hospitals do these things, and city councils do these things.
It was a combination of our jurisdiction in terms of any bylaws that might be useful, and police. That was how it was viewed. And the police are involved in those discussions too. I don't know whether Chris or Robin want to say anything. We were there really as sort of liaison to try and make sure that the right people got talking to each other, Gary.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, perhaps I'll talk with Chris afterwards about making sure that's got a comeback date sometime later this year. Yeah. Sorry, Paula.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one, and I think a lot of this conversation can occur offline, but I just want to flag it. I'm interested in the approval of delegates for conferences and how that works against policy so that it's transparent and consistent. Not opposed to it, actually. Wouldn't vote for it in this form till I understood it. So, for example, I have previously asked how delegates get decided, because I do believe that council should have representation at key conferences, so don't get me wrong, but it's just got to be done in a transparent and consistent way. I mean, I paid from my professional development budget to go to the local government conference, even though I was the chairperson of the organising committee of the local government conference. So, things like that don't seem to have a sort of what's the consistent and transparent framework for deciding how these delegates get approved. I must say that when we were at Regional Council, we used to bring a list of delegates and get them voted on like this, so that it was clear and transparent, and councillors could express interest and other things like that. But I don't understand how it's working, so probably I can't vote for that. But I'd love to have a conversation offline and see what the outcome is.
Well, I think it would be helpful if you participated in this discussion, because this is the first time it's brought there, and I brought it here because I know that in the past this system has worked quite well, and we actually have a policy in place that there is a budget line, and I've spoken with the governance manager about this, which there's a budget line for conference by resolution, it's called, where a council or a committee authorises someone to attend a conference on its behalf. The budget will come out of that. Otherwise, there's a policy in place for your personal choice to attend a conference or some other training item, budget line for that, and the Chief Executive's got the power to approve that. The conference by resolutions obviously has to be a vote there, and what I've suggested is that for fairness sake, that there be a sharing of the conference by resolution budget that's provided it's voted on. There has to be an actual vote at a committee.
That's great, and I understand that, and that's pretty much similar to what Regional Council did. But I asked about it prior to the local government conference and was told that I needed to use my professional development budget. And I feel if I'd known that that policy existed, I might have made a case saying, well, as the organiser of the committee, at least do I get to go as a delegate of City Council, since I've given up 8 months of work on it. But look, it's just around people understanding what the tools are and what's available to them. It's not a they have, why didn't I have type of thing. It's more, how can I understand how this works so that it's fair and reasonable to all councillors.
I think we can ask the governance manager when she comes back from holiday to put it out to us specifically, but I did have this discussion with her, and it's a policy that's been around for a number of years. I know Angela and I have used that in the past to have been involved in that with attending Traffin's conferences, for instance. That was
specifically in this. I'll talk with Richard offline about the local government conference, which presently sits on my professional development.
Yeah. So the point with this, though, is there is a proposed resolution to cover that off so that system can work this time, and it can't be. You can't use the conference by resolution unless you actually pass a resolution at a council or committee meeting. So that's why that's here. And the object being to have official delegates there, not just ones that go by personal choice. Yeah. We'll come to that at the end of the discussion. Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yeah, I think we do need to. It's good. We need to. That's my understanding, as you've stated, and Angela, and I think it's good that we do get clarification and perhaps even a refined, updated policy comes back, so that, given that we've got a number of new councillors, but there seems to be a bit of ambiguity, and I think that's a good idea. And I think your approach is personally a good one, because, for example, there'll be 2 delegates go to Nelson, and that's funded, and other people who want to choose out of their budget to go, and it's all.
Well, that's not the proposal.
Yeah.
It's the proposal is to share the available conference by resolution amount across all delegates that are going. That's clear.
Sure. So look, I think we'll go offline on that. I think it's a good formula, as long as people clearly understand the category in which they go to something and the quantum that they have available to them, etc. But I want to just focus, if I can, on the speed traffic safety issues. And personally, yes, I like that sign and the 3 very responsible, low-key councillors in front of the sign. I think what I would like as an individual elected member, without sort of being one of the 161,000 roads traffic safety experts.
166,000.
166,000 is a list actually of all roads in Hamilton that have that are basically above 70k or above 60k, 80k and above. And that's certainly not to revisit, the Cobham Drives of this world, or the Expressway, or some of the major arterials where that's clearly, but I want to just pick up and see where we have that sort of roads with low residential density or semi-rural roads, etc. And we are increasingly, I think, as a layperson, picking up the sort of strange thing about you've got an 50k, then 80k zone, but along the 80k zone there's been an increase in dwellings, etc., and they are now very much coming into that peri-urban or semi-urban category. You may already have that offline somewhere, or there may be a list.
Without having a big discussion here, Martin, that's coming up later in the agenda under the speed limit.
Okay, I'll pull back
items.
Yeah, sorry.
10 and 11, actually 12, 10 and 11.
All right, okay, I'll pull back. Thank you.
So we're going, and some of that information you want will be there, and we'll work out what extra we need.
Yeah, because we've got the speed task force going.
We've got the speed limit task force going.
Okay, that's a better way to pick it up. Thank you.
But some of it is coming up today.
Sure, okay.
Yep. This was meant to just a couple of thoughts on an agenda item. That's
Yeah,
all.
I like the poster, Mr Chair.
Thank you.
Like the sign.
Yeah. Councillor Leo, sorry.
Yeah, I think just going back to the boy race issue, it must have been about 2007, 2008 when the boy races really caused problems on Te Rapa Strait. And what it was a combined effort between Hamilton City Council and New Zealand Police, whereby the council actually closed down what I referred to as the Scotsman's Grandstand, which is the service lane along Te Rapa Road, where all the spectators congregated and watched the drag races which went up and down Te Rapa Road. They used the Bunnings pedestrian crossing, which they used to tape down with a piece of tape, so that they could get the green light as a starting gate. And then they would go up to the roundabout at Bryant Road, whereby they had a van which used to have holes drilled in the floor, and they would actually have diesel which dripped out through there so as they'd be able to drift around that particular roundabout. I think we really got on top of that by the police forming what was called the, initially it was called the BRAT team, which was the Boy Racer Action Team, and then that was changed because of political implications to the Illegal Street Racing Unit. What we had is we had 4 staff, because this legislation, which the low volume vehicle legislation, is very, very complicated legislation. And unfortunately, most of the boy and girl racers were apprentice mechanics, and they knew a hell of a lot more about that legislation than did the police. So we actually got some 4 police officers who were specially trained up in the low volume vehicle legislation. And I firmly believe that at that time we overcame the boy racer problem within the city. And what it was is the police were actually became babysitters, and they followed the groups around, because with all the communication systems which these young fellas have got, they knew exactly where you were. There is a piece of legislation known as the anti-cruising bylaw, which we could implement through council, but there it is fairly hard to enforce, because a vehicle must go past a certain point within a certain period of time so that it's deemed to be cruising. There are a number of issues here which I think is really it comes down to the unnecessary exhibition of speed. It becomes the illegal street racing, sustained loss of traction, all these sort of things all come into the one. So what I would recommend is maybe council should approach police to maybe reintroduce maybe what was known as the illegal street racing unit. Those guys, that's all they used to do, is they used to work 4 nights a week, and it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night when they were always out there. And as a result of that, I think we really got on top of it. The problem is, of course, is that Tauranga, I see, has got a anti-cruising bylaw, and of course, once they go past a certain point, of course, they're deemed to be cruising, and they have to move on, or otherwise gets charged. So, police are always short of resources, as they say, but there again, they must be responsive to the community expectation, I firmly believe. And I think probably as a start, Dave, the gate across the road is a good start, definitely. And I think what we really need to do is to meet with police and see if we can't reintroduce that illegal street racing unit again, and maybe we might start to have some impact on them, because the only way you're ever going to do this is to babysit these kids, and as long as you just keep on top of it, once you give them a week off or something like that, it soon flares up again, that's for sure.
I might add that the gate's been smashed twice and moved but once, so it's been bolted into the road and metal and all sorts of things now. They were pretty serious about trying to get rid of it.
I know that the Boy Racer fraternity say, give us an area where we can do our burnouts and all that sort of stuff, and that's where we'll go. I don't believe it is council's responsibility to do that. There are such places as the Mary Mary Dragway and all that where these kids can actually go. And I find that they don't do these things unless they've got an audience to perform to. And just got to get rid of that audience somehow, and that is the alcohol and the drugs and all that sort of stuff, which are in the periphery of that sort of scene.
I forgot to, when Gary asked the question before, they did report on the youngsters on the Mary Mary Dragway. One of them had been a volunteer operator of that on Friday nights, which they used to do it, which worked quite well for a while, but because all the people running it were volunteers apparently, it fell apart after a couple of 3 years. So that was a bit of an issue because they were getting at least the Hamilton and Auckland people to meet there and bring their own audience with them.
Sure. Yeah, that was known as the Drag Wars. They used to have on a Friday night up there. But the problem is, of course, we used to get issues with them returning back into the city.
I'm wondering, Chris, if we can... Chris is going to pick up some of that, and maybe we'll talk offline with you, Leo, about direction. We need to give a bit of direction to it, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Picked up an action to come back to DNI by the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, so Chris is suggesting, and we could put this in as a resolution, that staff bring back a report before the end of this year, calendar year, to the Growth and Infrastructure Committee meeting. We're working a wording for that. Well, yeah, if that's okay at this point, Leo?
Yep.
Yep, thanks. We've got Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Look, I just wanted to speak very briefly about the conference attendance thing.
Yep.
Is that something that you're suggesting there? Is that something that we can talk about now, or...?
Yes, absolutely. I know we've hopped around it, but there's only 2 issues in here, though, sort of.
Okay.
So it's all right.
Look, I think there's good logic to what you're suggesting here, particularly if it's extended across the board, I think, to councillors who want to attend conferences or events, as well as the sort of nominated council representative. To me, it's all about professional development and encouraging as many councillors as possible to benefit from opportunities. I do have some sympathy with what Councillor Southgate is saying in terms of the local government event that she went to. Is there any opportunity to sort of retrospectively sort that out for her? Or?
I'm sure that the council itself could do that, not this committee today, but the council itself could. I've no idea how people got to go to that other than what Paul has said, because I myself didn't go, sorry.
I
just to make sure that the conferences that were within this committee's area, if you like, were handled like this.
Yeah, it just feels to me if we're going to do it, it needs to be across the board, so it's fair for everyone, really, is my thought, you know, in other areas of the council as well.
Yeah, we can recommend to council something. We can't decide for them on retrospective or on conferences really that are not in this area. Andrew, do you want to talk on that particular item? Yep.
Yes, we add to your resolution that we'll look at reviewing that personal development policy and have a look at that and bring something back.
As a part B, that we request that council review the professional, the councillor training budget, I believe it's called, and the conference by resolution policy as well. That's the 2 parts.
Yeah, to bring them both in together.
As a B, just to get something on the table.
Yeah, that's good.
And this would be, what's there now would be an A, if you like.
Yeah, and I'm happy to lead that and have a look at that. So if you want to include that in there.
Okay. We'll work on a wording for that as well while we're going through this. Jeff, had you finished? Do you want to?
No, I'd finished, yeah.
Thanks. Siggy?
Thank you. I just want to talk about the boy races problem or challenge. I think it's more for challenge, and I know Councillor Tuman talked about, and he knows a lot more about that than I do, that we, you know, setting something up for these young people, but we're actually pushing them just somewhere else. If we stop it here, we push them somewhere else, and we're building beautiful playgrounds for little children. We're doing all this, but what have these? As long as we've got these fast cars, and we are glorifying the bad Holdens or the bad Fords or whatever, crappy whatever. Did I say something wrong again? And we're still paying for what we did in Hamilton a few years ago with highly paid boy racers. And I just think, and we weren't even allowed to race. That was so unfair. I asked whether I could race there through there too, and they wouldn't let me. is there any way that we can do something to actually set something up for them? I don't know. I know there's OSH and there's danger and all that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, is there anything, or could we organise something with Mary and, or wherever that racetrack is? I don't know whether there's any possibility for these young people to, you know, we've got these fast cars. I mean, if we just want them to go 100, we should only let cars be made up to 100 or 50 or whatever, but we don't, and so we will have that problem. I mean, I don't know, was anybody young once a few years ago, you know? I'm not into racing, but I just understand,
Yes,
you know.
you're starting to debate the actual
Sorry,
issue now.
yeah. I'm just wondering whether there's any possibilities.
And well, there undoubtedly is, and Leo's suggestion about us doing some work with the police on what we could do about incorporates alternatives like Mary, that's what was certainly my understanding.
Okay.
Staff have also going to cast their eyes around something I asked Robin a few days ago at any other possibilities. Someone suggested at the end of the forum that you could look at wherever the expressway is cut off some of the roads, you know, that go out into the country, whether there are any dead ends with no one living on them, where that might also be able to be done. But you know, the motion that Chris has got written out for us here is going to come forward at Leo's suggestion, is going to incorporate the possibility of anything like that sometime in the next 4 months, coming back to us. So that's not being forgotten.
Cool.
Okay. So anyway, we'll read that out in a sec. I've just got
Thank you.
Rob and then James.
Yeah, look, my question is around the professional development. Am I correct in assuming that by resolution means that that is an allocation of funds for professional development over and above each councillor's own professional development budget, which has been already set by, I think, the last council?
Yeah, an allocation, well, it's been set longer than that, yes. And
I think it was set at the beginning of the last council, wasn't it?
I think the amount was changed.
Sorry, the amount was changed.
Yeah, and I think
right.
it's in the order of 20,000. But I'm sorry, Leanne's not here to confirm that. She was going away to check that amount, but
Okay.
it hasn't been used for quite some time.
The full amount of the...
or in fact, any of it in some cases recently.
Rather than hold up this meeting, I would certainly welcome Mayor Andrew taking on board a review of that, because I suspect it probably saves a lot of time if we've got adequate professional development budgets anyway, without having to do the resolution bit. So I'd welcome that review.
I think the original policy intention of the conference by resolution was not so much as a training budget, it was a representation budget, which is sort of what Paula talked about before. And the idea was that anyone appointed to go or given money out of that budget to go, even if it was only part, was required to report back in some way.
Oh, okay. So there were some strings attached to it.
That was one of them, yeah.
Okay.
But that wasn't a part of the policy. It was just sort of an understanding after discussion by councillors.
Certainly welcome the review so that we know what the terms and conditions are of each of them. Thank you.
Yep, and we're just working on the wording for that, Chris?
Yeah, I just got a lot of picking up the detail, but...
Yep, so we'll come back with that in a sec. And I've got James.
Just in answer to Siggy's comments, you know, do we really want to get involved in setting up places for boy racers to go and do their thing? Look, you've got places like Hampton Downs has got a skid pan out there. They can do that all the time if they want to, if they can organise it with organisers. But if you start opening up dead-end roads and everything for them to use, you've got all sorts of issues there with OSH, people having accidents. And if you've ever seen these guys when they are doing their racing, it's not in a safe type of racing. You've got people hanging out of windows, you've got people doing all sorts of things, people standing close to the sides of the road. You know, I used to work closely with the boy racer team here in Hamilton when I was at North Hamilton, sorting out the problem with hundreds of cars down Te Rapa Straight. And they did come from Auckland, they did come from Tauranga and all over the place. So I don't think council should get in the business of giving these guys anywhere to race, because you're opening up a big can of worms.
We're certainly not deciding any of that here today. We're deciding that staff are going to bring back a report on it within the next 4 months, with having had a look at any alternatives. But I think the main one suggested is what some have called Mary and some have called Hampton Downs Raceway. not the race track, the raceway, the drag strip. Okay. Okay. So, councillors, first thing we've got just in terms of the boy races, this will be point C, let's say. And hang on, I'm going to read it out first. The staff report back to the 5th of December Growth and Infrastructure Committee meeting on the potential collaboration and action with Waikato District Council and Waipa District Council to manage the problem caused by illegal street races. Does that cover what you're suggesting? Thanks. So that's that one.
And Brendan's, he's put one for the...
Oh, have you got one for the... Can I... Okay. That's apparently coming up on the screen. So the recommendation that's down there would be A, the part that Brendan's got over there, which someone's going to read to us very, very soon, is B. And the one that I've just read out is C, relating to the boy races. The other two relate to the conference.
So the B would be that the Growth and Infrastructure Committee requests that the Council review the councillor training budget and conference by resolution policy and report back to the Council by 19 October 2017, the review to be led by Mayor King.
I think that covers what we were talking about, Paula and Jeff. Yeah, that. So that's the next meeting of this? No, 2 meetings away. Sorry, two rounds of meetings away. Council. Yeah. I'm just checking that the wording covers what we were talking about.
I need to see the rate. But
Yep.
yeah.
Paula, you want to talk on that? So, sorry. Well, hang on. Before we do that, is there any other discussion on the report before we get to that 3-part resolution? If not,
just a question, Mr. Chair,
Angela?
on your resolution, we still need to, I think, we still need to put in the resolution the delegates that we're going. We have a policy now. We're working under a current policy. So don't you want that recommendation added to approve the delegates as you've asked for in your report?
Well, I've done it
certainly for Treffins.
I've done it a slightly different way, but I'm happy to incorporate that. Now, I don't know everyone who wants to go to Treffins. The point I was making is that we should put in the allocation for 2 lots of funding, 2 delegates funding, and share that amongst whoever choose to go. That's
So I agree with that, and we
Yeah.
are operating under a policy now. So
Yep.
do,
And look, we can find
up
out
to
today.
you. I mean,
who
your
they are.
motion, but yeah.
Yeah, when we get to the motion, I'll ask who it is. We'll list all of them, and so that we know who it's been shared amongst. How about that?
Yeah.
For both conferences.
Yeah.
Okay. So, is there any other discussion on this? So I just want to get it clear. There's 3 parts. Part A is what's written down here as my recommendation. Part B is the one Brendan worked out, which is the checking out the policy for those conferences. Part C is the boy races one that Chris worked out to come back in 4 months. And as part of Part A, I just need to check. I'll do it now, I think, Angela, so it's all up front. So there were 2 conferences. One's the Treffins one, 2017 Treffins conference. And my understanding of those who've asked to go, Siggy, Jeff, I'm not sure about Jeff, Siggy, Mark. Well, we need to know, we can't appoint possibles.
Well, I'm more than happy to, if I go to Nelson, I'm more than happy to take that.
Okay, well then I think we exclude you at this stage, Martin, because so Leo, there's Leo, Mark, Siggy, I'm not sure about Jeff, and myself. So those 4. Are there any others?
These are the people who are approved by council, hence it won't go against their personal budgets.
Some of it
will. Okay.
Hang on, let's not have a roundtable discussion. Jeff asked a question. Whoever we nominate here would have, if the motion goes through, would have 2 conference by resolution taken off the costs, and the rest would be paid for by conference by choice, their own personal training budget, if you like. People have been asked about 3 times about the Traffins one, so we just need to check the names. We want to put them in. It'll be in brackets, councillors Henry, Bunting, McPherson, Tooman, and...
Category, because I'm a bit uncertain at the moment, so I'd have to go under my own steam.
I think that's easier, to be honest, because we have to get registration in to get early bird fees and all that sort of stuff, okay? So those 4 are the ones that are being approved as delegates by this resolution, in brackets, for the conference, the Smart Cities Conference in Melbourne, councillors Bunting, Taylor and myself that have been at this point, and the recommendation that there be 1 allocation of conference by resolution money shared across them. Are there any others? We're not trying to exclude people. We've sent out notices. Okay, so could we put those names in brackets of them? So that's the resolution. I'll take it all together, but if we needed to split them, we can. Okay, so A, B, and C. We can see up there, thanks. So, Paula, I think you want to speak, yeah.
Because I think if this is going to be reviewed, look, which was more than I expected of it, I just thought there was a vacuum in which people didn't understand the current policy and what was available to them. Certainly wouldn't like this to become an opportunity to slash the training budgets, because one conference, as you know, can just about swallow up the whole amount. I mean, conferences, unfortunately, have become incredibly expensive to attend. So, you know, why it might look like a lot of money, that's one conference and 1 health and safety training kind of modules, and you're done with that amount of money. So it's not a lot of money. But it's just, yeah, but I'm happy to go with that now, because I think that it does bring some greater understanding. Can we please have the existing policies circulated to us so that we can understand what the base we're coming from for the discussion? Thank you.
I should add, well, I may have done it in there, that's the Traffins conference, unlike the others, is actually a cheap conference for councillors. It's only $600 versus the normal $2,000-ish. Yeah, and that's always because it's been run by council people. I think they've kept it down rather than an outside organisation. But anyway, sorry, I've got Councillor Leo. Sorry.
Get Robin to talk to that. She just emailed me.
Okay, we looked up the Traffins conference thing, and it didn't say that, but
I've just literally confirmed via email this morning that there is a special, because I'm on the Traffins organising committee. There is a special in place that if there is a full-paying staff member, the councillor can go half price. Except for 1.
carry the bags. You're carrying mine.
We'll be looking at probably spending at least a couple of staff at that full member price. Myself, I'm half price because I'm now a life member of Traffins.
So there's at least 3 staff going.
There's an opportunity there for perhaps getting some more discount.
Yeah. Well, the actual quantum is not important right now, but there's at least 3 staff going, Leo. 3, that way. And at least 4 councillors going, with the possibility of 2 others later.
I'm just wondering whether or not I'm counted as a council or otherwise executive, so.
Yeah, and look, let us find all that out. We just want to get that early bird fee before, which we don't have another meeting before.
Sure.
So that may well be true. Leo's on the executive and Robin's on the conference organising committee, and we've always, well, at least for 20 years, been heavily involved in Traffins from here. It's a much more practical conference than most.
It's a good value conference. Very good value.
Yeah. Sorry, we've got the speaking order, which is Mayor Andrew.
So I'm still on questions. I just don't understand A. So approves funding for 2 delegates, and then we've got 4 delegates. And
well, yeah, sorry, it should be 2 delegates from 2 delegates costs would be the best way of doing it.
Thank you.
And the same with 1 delegate's cost. The idea, Andrew, is to share the conference by resolution budget, so it doesn't, one conference doesn't kill the training budget for an individual council for the whole period.
It would be very clear if you put approves budget for two delegates costs spread across.
Yep.
Da, da, da.
Can we do, that makes sense, Amy, can you do that, please?
Still.
Yep, that makes absolutely clear. Thanks, Gary. And the same for the 1 spread across 3 names. Okay, councillors, any more discussion on these? Either any of the 3 parts? Everyone clear on what they are for? Gary?
I'm just a little uncomfortable with C, not, which is about the boy races stuff.
Yep.
I think we need to be reasonably honest about this. We are dealing with people who are breaking the law and possibly going to cause accidents and possibly kill someone. And it's ironic that 30 minutes ago we were listening to a resident in tears concerned about speed on roads. And I don't want to sound like a grumpy old man, but I hope we take a reasonably firm view with these guys, and rather than spending a whole lot of money trying to set up an adult skateboard park that they can drive their cars in. You know, I disagree with Ziggy's comments earlier in the point. I think these guys know they're breaking the law and they should be treated as lawbreakers. But anyway, that's...
Gary, there's no proposal to do
that. I know.
If there was, it would be...
I can see that's very open to anything, so...
Yeah. It will come back to this committee.
Yeah.
So that's all I can say. There, I've got Councillor Martin.
Yes, I totally agree with Councillor Mallett. As a former MP, I worked with Clayton Crossgrove around legislation to try and restrict the activities of boy races, and of course we have the Crusher Collins where the cars are crushed. I actually think this is frankly a problem of affluence, and you know, I think that we have to be very careful that we don't indulge dangerous behaviour, because at the other end of the boy racer, going even in the middle of the night in somewhere, is some innocent family and people, and your kids and my kids coming the other way. So I think our tolerance should be minimal. We have talked and talked about speedways and doing all of this, but even irrespective of that, it just seems to be that you do have a small, probably a minority of people in that fraternity that will continue to do illegal practice. You can do all you like, but it'll make, in my view, very difference. And I think when you have residents have to speak to the media anonymously and not reveal their names for fear of their own personal safety, then I think we should not be romantic at all about some of the people we are dealing with. And by all means, let them go to the Speedway at Hampton Downs and all of that and do that stuff. I think there are some facilities that are there and available for them. So I do hope we don't give the wrong messages on this.
Okay, I just need to assure councillors there's nothing in there that's proposing...
Not at all.
...anything physical, but and whatever might be proposed will come back to the...
You could hold one of those signs up to them as well.
No, you can do this. Pay for it this time. Okay, is there any other speakers? If not, that's the resolution, 3 parts. We'll go to the board just to get it down for the staff. Sorry? Yeah, voting on all 3. Okay, that's carried 12-0, all in favour. Let's move on. We'll get item 13 done now before we break for morning tea, if that's right. That's the approval of the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan Goals and Objectives, page 167. We're doing this now to make sure Mark can... I'm going to ask staff to introduce it and Mark to make any comments following that, and then open for questions to the floor. Thanks. Trent?
Okay. Morning, everyone. Just by way of introduction, I'm Trent Fowles. I'm the Compliance Manager of City Waters, and this is Charlotte Capmuir, the Waste Minimisation Advisor for City Waters as well. Just obviously the report we're bringing to you is seeking endorsement of the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan 2018 to 24, the vision, goals and objectives as developed and endorsed by the Waste Task Force. Just to provide some context and background, the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan is a legislated requirement to meet the requirements of the Waste Minimisation Act. The plan is required to be updated every 6 years. Hamilton City Council's first Waste Management and Minimisation Plan was developed in 2011-12. The Waste Management and Minimisation Plan outlines Hamilton's plan to promote waste management and minimisation, obviously. The waste levy funding received by Council must be spent on activities listed in the Waste Management Plan. These activities will be brought to the September GNI Committee meeting for endorsement along with the full plan. Our current Waste Minimisation Plan expires in April 2018, at which time the new plan is required to be adopted. The time frame for this process is outlined on page 172. It's item 13, attachment 1. Just want to also bring to your attention, if the plan is not adopted by this date, external funding from the waste levy will cease.
Thanks. Charlotte, were you going to say anything? No. All three. Mark.
Yeah, just thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the staff for the excellent work they're doing on this massive body of work. It's huge. This is just a small, as Chris would say, chocks under the wheel exercise. The work we're going under is the Waste Minimisation Plan, which is, as Trent said, legislatively required. We're also looking at the housing stock, the waste review, the bylaw review, and of course the contract with regards to the wheelie bins, etc. Now this sits on its own, but what we wanted to do as a task force was basically get this committee's endorsement of where we've got to so far so we can carry on with the work, because we didn't want to do too much work and then have it changed at the end. So really it's a rubber stamping exercise. We've tried to make the Waste Minimisation Plan a lot more of a positive document rather than a nanny state type document. We're trying to make it inherent in people's lifestyles, recycling and waste minimisation, without being too heavy-handed about it, and we're trying to be as cost-effective as we possibly can. So that's pretty much it.
And this, councillors, has nothing to do with the current tender process that we're going through for the next waste collection sort of contract. That's separate, and we'll come back to this meeting next time. Is it? Soon anyway. We're doing some more work on it anyway.
Yeah. Tender evaluation briefing for council will be the October.
Thanks, Trent. Yeah. So, councillors, questions, and then the resolutions on the first page, 167, A, B and C. So do we have any questions on that? If not, sorry, no, I'm not. I'm still on the voting page. I should have just known. I should have gone to you without even looking at the board, Gary. He's got an automatic thing that presses the button as soon as the item comes up.
Yeah.
He's painted up there.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm quite concerned that the word economics I haven't seen anywhere through this whole report. So we talk about visions and whatnot, and we're talking about minimising stuff left, right, and centre. But there seems to be no target that this thing should actually make financial sense as well.
Yeah.
So the reason in our vision we have
Charlotte, can you speak into the thing a bit? Yeah, sorry.
So in our vision, we put in about it being an integral part to our lifestyle and economy, because in terms of efficiency and economics, waste is a really important part. So we actually think we do have it in our vision.
I don't think it does, because you're saying you're just saying, yep, it's integral. So therefore, no, don't ask any further questions. At what stage? When do you weigh up the extra costs required? Because a heck of a lot of recycling, actually most recycling is uneconomic and needs to be subsidised. And it can only work if you put a law in saying you have to do these things. So, and that has huge effects that ripples through the whole economy. So everyone within the community that's subsidising it is paying, their quality of their standard of living drops by the amount of the subsidy. So I don't see any measure there in the vision about that.
Gary, this is only the strategy and vision, we're not doing the KPIs and so forth.
But strategies and vision should surely say that it's economical. I mean, I would think that's a reasonably high level thing, not something you'd have down the bottom.
Sorry, we're just waiting for someone to turn their machine off over there. It's speaking to them.
So can I just test with Trent, like we do have some objectives if you look at C3, that all Hamiltonians have access to affordable and resilient waste and recovery services, and 5, Hamilton City Council is partnering with others to achieve efficient, which to me is economic efficiency, and effective waste minimisation management. So I think the words are in there, Gary, but I can assure you the process that we're going through is looking for efficiency and dollar values, and I think that was the foundation of the business case that we brought to council some time ago when we looked at the options. So what we're now going to the market to get real costs to match the business case, and the business case did bring out that issue of affordability and what things were going to cost. So I can assure you it's a really key part of what we're doing.
Okay. In the proposed goals on 169, so it's paragraph 21, Romans 1, then number 3, Hamilton community is leading in waste minimisation. Why would you want to be leading in it? So is that more important than having houses for people and roads and sewage systems that work and things?
Yeah.
Pardon? Okay, so that that just says we will be a leader in this. So if we're not a leader in this, that would be a failure, would it? If we don't achieve that.
Yeah. Aspirational line again.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's a medium-term goal about looking at what the community, also recognising what the community is already doing. So recently we're at Kaivolution, which is a food waste diversion program that's led by the community. And since they established, they've diverted 300 tonnes from landfill. And we provide a little bit of funding into that, but they've led all of that as a community organisation. So about recognising that there's a lot of innovation out there within our community, and that they can lead and be the most efficient in delivering those services than the council can.
Okay.
The emphasis there is actually on the Hamilton community is leading as opposed to Hamilton Council is leading. I think that's what the intention of that phrase was. So what we're trying to do is provide a much more enabling document. So there's actually a community-led document. So all we do is encourage the community to take initiative like that, so we don't have to constantly be doing stuff.
Okay.
That was the meaning of that one.
Paragraph 22 refers to the aligned to the Hamilton Plan outcomes. From memory, I don't think this was part of the Hamilton Plan. How would this fit into the Hamilton Plan? We were going to be great gardens, good economy.
So in terms of economy, resource recovery is actually a really important part in our city. We've had 3 new C&D processes coming in, looking to come into Hamilton in terms of building growth. Construction and demolition waste. So looking at the fact that Hamilton's really growing and there's an opportunity here to invest into Hamilton. So in terms of the economy, that's actually a really good growing point for us. And then in terms
Sorry, that didn't make sense. You said something about demolition and then growing.
They're processing the waste.
Oh, okay.
So it creates jobs.
The waste from the demolition?
Yes. So chipping wood, processing the plasterboards, glass recycling, all of that as a result of the construction and demolition is actually a great opportunity.
Okay, so I understand that you'll create jobs by having to move the stuff off the... If you demolish something, you've got to move the stuff away.
Yeah.
Does someone make money out of that, do they?
Yes,
That's
and
economic.
processing it in Hamilton, yeah.
So what are the economics of moving a whole lot of concrete?
Keep it small distance, you can actually break it down and it can be then re-put into new process. Wood, processed down into mulch a lot of the time, and then that's used on gardens. So if you're keeping it local, the actual transport costs aren't too high, and it can be very economically viable.
Yeah, okay, we're not going to agree on this, because I would be very, very surprised that those things are economic. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thanks. Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to continue, not with the exact line of thought of Gary, but just if first question is around paragraph 28, where we talk about the waste levy funding of 570,000. Do we receive that or do we pay it?
We received that.
We receive that from central government, do we? And then, well, okay. Do you know what the funding is for next year?
It's based on population and it's calculated based on the whole proportion of the waste levy that's received. So it depends on how much waste is going into landfill.
Yep.
As to how much we then get. But as we know, waste to landfill is continually increasing at the moment. So it has been increasing year on year.
So not what we put into the landfill, but what's being put into the landfill nationally is the way that central government actually fund that levy.
Correct.
Okay. So is that levy intended to cover our costs of operating our minimisation, or is it a levy that we then disperse out to various community groups who are, as you mentioned, at the Coevolution people and some of the others who are actually at the coalface and doing that particular work that in itself leads to the waste minimisation?
So currently we administer a grant, it's 50,000, and that's a total grant, which is split
Which
up
comes from that
so we
570?
get submissions to,
Okay.
for that. And the rest of it is basically, it's obviously waste minimisation advisor, our staff,
Yep.
and the time, and just initiatives, education programs, etc. As long as it's focused towards waste management and minimisation, and
You can use that
ties in
grant.
with our activities identified in the plan, then we're entitled to use it.
So do we spend more than that? I mean, if we've got if we received 570,000 last year, what's the, I couldn't see anything in the report which suggests what is the budget line as far as council is concerned to operate the minimisation. Is it enough, or are we topping it up?
No, it is sufficient.
It is sufficient. So there's no real cost to council, to the ratepayer, if you like, in terms of operating this.
Within the activities that will come out within the
that
waste
we're doing.
management and minimisation plan.
Okay. When do we know what the levy's going to be for next year? Assuming that we continue to adopt and remain eligible for the levy.
We receive it on a quarterly basis.
Right.
So
we're into the next year now, so come September we should get the first payment. Okay. Just going back to the motion, and I'm assuming here that councillors will adopt the staff recommendation. And I come back to the comment that Gary made. Hamilton Community is leading in waste minimisation. That's under goals, and then under objectives. Again, we're leading by example in minimising waste. Leading, does that mean that we're at the forefront in terms of other local governments around the country?
Yeah, it's aspirational goals. So.
Okay. Is it costing us any more to be the leader?
We aren't at the moment.
We aren't the leader at the moment.
No.
But we would like to be.
We would like to. We haven't put in our previous waste minimisation plan. We had that Hamilton City Council would like to be a national leader. That would actually cost quite a bit of money.
Yep.
But this is looking about specifics about Hamilton City Council taking actions where we can demonstrate innovative ideas
Yep.
to lead in certain areas, and the same with the community.
Right. So it might be cost effective for us then to be, rather than leading, to be a leader. Which means that we can go and do our own thing in terms of where we think we can get some comparative advantages. Yeah.
I take that on board. I think it's a great idea. Secondly, we are kind of getting a little bit blurred too, as opposed to the concept of being a national leader, which we had in that last one. We didn't make it. We made it for a few days, but then everyone caught up and took over. And as Charlotte said, it's a really expensive goal to have for vanity. But what we are really trying to thrust through with this is that the community leads innately.
Yep.
With this. So they are kind of getting blurred.
I can understand having that vision and wish to be a leader anyway. Well, could I just signal, Chair, if council are supportive of that we just simply change the wording in those two lines?
Yeah,
If this is the motion that we'll be
Well,
voting on.
when we come to the motion, after questions and that, I'll come back to that, check that out, Rob.
Okay, thank you.
I've got Paula, if you want to speak in the debate, okay. Chris just wanted to put a bit of clarification forward.
I was just wanting to check councillors' understanding that for every tonne of waste that we take to landfill, we pay a levy. So we pay a cost to take every tonne to landfill, and we get some back through the levy. So Gary, that's the economics of the business case that we put forward. So we think it's going to cost more and more to take rubbish to landfill. So the economics are there to try and reduce the amount that you put into landfill to save money by the increase in cost to landfill. So the business case was built around that. So I just wanted to check, Councillor Rob, that was your understanding that we pay for every tonne we put in, and we get some back through a levy that we can spend on waste minimisation.
And that's accounted for in our, as I understand it, in our refuse budget, isn't it?
Yeah,
as opposed to, what I was looking for was whether or not this minimisation was in fact self-funding from the grant money, and I think I've got the response to that, that roughly within that $500,000 that we get, we're able to operate this whole review and the work with the community.
And there is a figure in the budget for this year. It's obviously an estimate, because you don't know till you've put all the tonnage in there what levy you're going to get back in a sense, but there is an estimate. There would have to be a revenue estimate done.
Over and above this $500,000, we get the $500,000 anyway, don't we?
Yeah, just estimating what it will be year on year
Yeah,
on year.
yeah.
Because it is growing. It used to be 400,000. It's now 500, 700 or whatever.
570.
570, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we're just coming to the wording of that, and Rob suggested, let's get this right, staff recommendation 2B3 is a leader rather than the word leading.
A leader in waste minimisation. And then under C4, Hamilton City Council is a leader by example in minimising waste.
Well, can I suggest that we do that with 4? But 3 would complicate the community leading type thing. I mean, if you can help me with the semantics around that.
Yeah, okay.
One of them's the community, Hamilton City-wide, but this one, the second one's Hamilton City Council.
Okay, I'm happy with community staying
so
as leading, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so before we go any further, then we're going to have a resolution moved by Mark, which incorporates that slight wording change in
C4.
C4.
Yeah.
C4, is it?
So it would say Hamilton City Council.
Yeah.
Is a
seconded by Paula.
Like that.
Yep. So we're okay on that wording. Just check that staff. Amy, have you got that? Amy's got that, so it'll show on the board in a second. We've got moved by Mark, seconded by Paula. Mark, floor is yours to talk. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I'll be very brief.
Paula, I'll ask you afterwards.
Thanks, Paula. Look, I'll be very brief. Again, it's a massive body of work, and we had a really interesting comment by one of the consultants who was taking one of our workshops, and she said, if you want to check an animal's health, you check the state of its number 2s. And if you want to check a city's health, you equally check the state of its waste. This waste.
Something else.
No. I'm not going to go anywhere dangerous today. The previous waste minimisation plan, which is a legislative requirement that has to get ticked off every 5 years, 6 years, was an honourable one. And at that stage, when we put in our recycling bins and we were going really well, we were leaders. But like I said before, it took about 10 minutes for people to overtake us. So what we've tried to do with a lot of great work from staff, and I think Councillors Southgate and Henry and Dave, Councillor McPherson as well for their input into this too, is to create a much more positive, economic and enabling document which gets some community leadership, because we kind of believe that if the community leads this, they care about it and they will drive it. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of areas that we are behind. The data, for example, that we have on waste is pretty vague. So it's very hard to make great economic decisions. So that's a part of our body of work. The housing stock that Deputy Mayor Gallagher is very interested in is coming. The bylaw review is coming, and of course the contract renewal is coming. So this is, again, like we said earlier on, it's just effectively a rubber stamping idea so we can continue our work along this minimisation plan rather than come back too late in the piece and have the whole thing changed. So it's really an endorsement to carry on the work we're doing, I think, and would invite you along to any of the task forces. I think you'd be really impressed with it. It's certainly an area I've got very passionate about and knew nothing about, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to lead it as well. So yes, with your indulgence, I'd like to move the staff recommendation with that one change to C4.
Paula, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, just want to remind Council that this was had community input, that there were a wide range of stakeholders that worked together to create this. So I just want to give them credit and thanks for their input in this, and I think we do need to take that on board in supporting the goals and objectives. I was a bit confused with the comment about leadership before because I thought it was a little bit about semantics. Leadership to me is a better way of working. And why wouldn't Hemel Council want to be doing at least best practice, if not showing leadership? I think we are a council that wants to show leadership and go forward. And as Chris has mentioned, and a number of other people have tried to explain, waste costs us right now. It costs us many ways. We have to dispose of it. It also costs us from an environmental well-being and a social well-being perspective as well. So we need to do something. We're not the best council by any stretch at the moment in this arena, so let's not deceive ourselves that we're close. But we're on a journey and we need to go that way. When I came onto council, I felt a little uncomfortable that but I understand the reasons for it, that we were making decisions around the contract before having the new waste management plan in place. To me, that seemed a little cart before the horse. We really want to understand why we're doing things, and that will understand the full scenario before we jump to the solutions. But like Councillor Bunting says, this group is working very hard and passionate about this, and I think that we can make strides, and I'm really happy that we've chosen some very aspirational goals, some innovative goals, because we know that we can learn from some of our neighbours in the Waikato, like Extreme Waste Raglan, who are one of the pinnacles of waste management for such a small community. South Waikato Achievement Centre with all their electronic waste recycling. So we've got a lot of opportunities out there, and this plan seeks to grab those opportunities as best we can. So it won't be all Hamilton City Council money in dealing with waste. It will be a partnership across the region, and I think the outcomes will be great, good for the community.
Thanks, Paula. Siggy, thanks.
Getting back to Councillor Mallard, what he talked about with and I just want to say that I met a building company that uses recycled concrete for their new buildings. So there is money in that, and otherwise they wouldn't do it. So I just want to add that on. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just going to jump in, Angela. Sorry, because I can't put myself on the list. There, just to say one short piece, really. In 2002, 15 years ago, I think it was 2002, we started the current waste collection contract. We were a leading council. We were one of the very few, may have collected, that was collecting recyclables, plastics at the time, and we were a leader in the country, and it was done primarily for economic reasons. The decision to go that direction was actually made when Gary was last on council, and there was a good economic argument, had strong support around council. The more waste we could divert from landfill, the less it cost the city. So that was a powerful driver at the time, the economic thing, and I think it's still a powerful driver along with the environmental aspirations. So I think that we're still we're trying to get back in sync with where we were, in my opinion. So that's all I've got to say. And Angela is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, in response to Councillor Southgate's comment, the amazing new service that we're going to be delivering in 2019 with the bins is actually a result of the first waste minimisation plan that we did, and staff did an incredible job on that. So the timing, I think, was correct, and the outcome is really exciting from that first plan. So look forward to Councillor Bunting's work and staff on the next plan. Thanks.
Okay, Mark, do you want the right of reply?
Thank you. No, it's turning into a love fest.
Yeah, are you feeling uncomfortable with that aspect?
No, but I would like to, I would like to invite councillors along to the task forces. Gary, those questions will be really good in those task forces, because that's what we need to. We need to get through those sort of questions in those groups. So, great work, guys.
Thanks, mate. We'll move to the board for voting, Amy. Yep. And councillors, immediately we get this result back, we'll break until 20 past for morning tea, and we'll start with the Waikato Regional Council passenger transport presentation.
The motion
so
is
that's
carried.
11-1. Thanks. Thanks very much, Trent and Charlotte.
The only thing I'd see in here which might lead to a real fancy too is the patronage. There's nothing really.
Can we have everyone back at the table who's in the room? Councillors, we're on item 8, page 69, which is the Regional Council update on passenger transport services and initiatives. And just noting that we, this new committee and new structure asked for this report to come in on a reasonably regular basis. I'm not sure whether we determine exactly how often. We're really pleased to have the Regional Council back here, the person of Andrew and Russ, who's the chair of the Regional Passenger Transport Committee, Russ Remington, and Mike Garrett is the manager. I'm not sure what your two exact titles are, so you better tell us yourself. But welcome to the meeting and thanks very much for coming along. There's a presentation which is a separate page that's come out, but it's going to be on the board as well there, councillors. So Andrew, Mike and Russ, I'm leaving it over to you to introduce yourselves however you want and to go through the topic here, and then we'll do questions at the end of it, hopefully, but if there was something desperate beforehand, we could probably interrupt. We'll see how we go.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, thank you very much, everyone, for the opportunity today. I'm Andrew Wilson, the PT Operations Manager with the Regional Council. With me is Councillor Remington, who's really engaged with PT, and I think it'll be a very familiar face for most around the table, and also Mike Garrett. So Mike Garrett's our CFO and public transport with the region, reports into Mike. So I might just launch into the presentation if that's okay. So we were invited here today to provide an update around public transport, particularly within Hamilton. So we've sort of broken that into three parts. One is looking at past performance, present actions that are underway, and future opportunities. So we'll start with past performance. So this graph up on the screen, I think, tells a really interesting story. So it's looking at public patronage on bus services within Hamilton since about 2003 through to last year. So we've seen it all in terms of this graph. From 2005 through to 2009 saw a really exceptional period in terms of growth of patronage. So over that period, patronage on buses grew by about 107%. And that's off the back of a lot of investment and effort, and I think much of it initiated by this council around new services. It's also off the back of the transport centre being built, so a lot of success in that period. Then we entered into a phase where patronage is pretty much flatlined, so over that period, 2010-ish to 2012-ish, we only saw about 2% growth. And then we're coming through a period now of reasonably significant decline in patronage on services, and there's a number of reasons for that. So over that period, we've seen fuel prices come down, we've seen car ownership go up, and we've seen a lot of roading improvements that's made it easier to drive. So the relative attractiveness of public transport's declined a bit over that period. We've seen, to an extent, patronage decline across a lot of regions throughout New Zealand, but we were a little bit ahead of the pack. We undertook some research at the beginning of 2016 into 2015, looking particularly targeting lapsed users of public transport to understand, why have they stopped using it. And they pointed to the relative ease of driving. They thought it was had increased. They also pointed to sort of social factors on buses, so not wanting to share crowded buses with students, that type of thing. So we've taken that away and come up with some strategies around how we might be able to address that. And I think one of the main, these are all factors that have played out nationally, but one of the main factors that's contributed to the patronage decline is over that period there hasn't been any major or significant improvements to PT services.
Andrew, I just want to break my own rule there and just interrupt, and because I expressed this at a regional passenger transport committee meeting as well. I believe that another factor that must be looked at in terms of the flatlining and decline period is the government requirement that there be a fare recovery ratio increase. In other words, a greater proportion of the cost to be covered directly by fares. And our council, back in the start of that 2010-ish, had a number of disagreements with the regional council about how high that should be. We thought it was too high, that would affect patronage growth, and that's almost a direct correlation with where it started flatlining and then started lowering. In other words, we weren't concentrating, in our opinion, enough on the provision of new services and sufficient services, and we're concentrating too much, we believed at the time, and I still believe, in that the fare recovery ratio is driving part of this problem.
Yeah.
So that's not mentioned as one of your lists there.
No, it's a good point, and it certainly is a factor. Through that period, it was certainly more difficult to get support for improvements. The focus was more on optimisation and managing costs. So I think that's played out across a lot of regions as well.
Can I add to that? So, like in the last 3 years, we actually haven't put the fares up, so we've been conscious of that issue. So our fare box recovery has actually declined. But you know, take your point on board, and we've held off. And Andrew will talk about later on in terms of there's a fare review project underway. So that's the reason we haven't touched the fares.
Thanks, Mike.
So I'll just hone in on that journey experience component as well. So I mentioned there's social perceptions around utilising bus services. There's also a number of other things driving that as well. So capacity and reliability of services probably also declined a bit over that period. So all those factors combined, I think, have given us the result that that we see. So what are we doing about it? So present actions. Quite a lot. We're really targeting increasing the journey quality of the journey experience, making public transport more attractive in Hamilton, and also doing a lot of work around service design, so improving the offering for customers. So in terms of improving journey experience, we've just come out of a tender process last year, and you'll see a lot of the new buses rolling around at the moment. So there's 43 new buses, brand new buses assembled in New Zealand. That'll be up and running, most of them up and running now, but they'll all be up and running by early next year. As part of that, the remainder of the fleet, there's about 60 to 80 buses that are used in Hamilton are being totally refurbished, those that aren't brand new, and deploying a common branding across all services as well. And we really think that'll leverage the make it appear to the public as a more cohesive system as well. In addition to that, free Wi-Fi on all buses, just an enhancement in journey experience, and also deploying a comprehensive set of CCTV cameras across the entire fleet as well, and that just gives us another tool in the toolbox to help manage some antisocial behaviour, and it's proving really effective so far. We're also, so we've got a peak time capacity problem on some services, so even with the declining patronage, we struggle to provide all the capacity at the moment, so we're looking to address that, and with the deployment of 4 double-deckers in the new year. So one of those on the Huntly service connecting with Hamilton, one on the Raglan service connecting with Hamilton, and 2 on the Orbiter service. And so these vehicles will be deployed at peak time only, and it's really to manage the peak of the peak in terms of demand. So the Orbiter service, for example, over the last 12 months has had about 500 occurrences of the demand exceeding the capacity at any given moment, which contributes to a sort of a negative journey experience for those people. So we've had passenger feedback, complaints come in saying, hey, I've had to wait 2, 3, 4 buses before I could get on. So we just can't afford to do that at peak time and want to grow services across the day as well. We're also well advanced now with the deployment of a vastly improved real-time information system for passengers. So, and two components to this, two passenger-facing components to this. One is an app that people can track their bus in real time, so they can get on-time arrivals, but they can also literally see the bus track along a map as well. There's also an on-street component to that we're going to trial at five locations. So they're really low cost but innovative real-time displays for streets. So if that goes well, we'll be looking to deploy that a bit wider as well. So we're hoping to have the passenger-facing component of the real-time system deployed within the next couple of months. It's taken a little bit longer than what we'd like, but it's important to get right. So early in the new year, we're also implementing a new ticketing system. So ourselves and 8 other regions have jointly procured a new system, and these are offer some significant improvements from a passenger's perspective. So at the moment, they can only pay the driver cash, or they come in and see us at the transport centre. With the new system, they can manage their accounts and topping up their cards online. And they can set up auto reload functionality, and they can have linked accounts as well. So what that means is parents can manage the accounts of their kids for school travel and the like. So things that passengers have been asking for a long time. So I think will make a really significant difference in terms of ease of use of the public transport system. So that will be up and running the first half of next year, and a really positive thing. In support of that, we're also having quite a fundamental review of our our fare system. So there's been quite a number of discussions around various committees, and we'll almost certainly bring a more detailed report back to this council. But in the meantime, having this council's representation through the joint PT committees. The fare review is really about making the system more simple for users and to understand and to administer, and also looking at affordability relative to other modes. One of the major changes that I think there's really good support for is moving to a zonal system for the entire region, which just evens things out and significantly simplifies how easy it is to understand the system. We're also looking or investigating changes to fare concessions and products. So I mentioned it's the journey experience we're focusing on, but we're also doing, I think, quite a lot around network design and how services are operating. So in terms of, there's quite a number of committed improvements that we're rolling out, and the first tranche of that goes live in October. So the Orbiter going back to a 15-minute all-day frequency, Monday to Friday, be a significant improvement compared to what we are. We're extending a number of routes through to the base, which for the services that go to the base already have seen really positive growth in a background of overall decline. 5 additional routes within the city will get weekend and public holiday services. Part of what we're doing is redeploying some resource, so this means that the existing Ruakura route will be disestablished or discontinued from October. And in support of these changes, we're comprehensively reviewing all the timetables from a reliability perspective, and that's throwing up a number of things that, if we solve, will increase the reliability of the services. There's a couple of things in terms of keeping the momentum around service improvements that we're working on, and we'll bring back to the respective committees for feedback. One is, and we will do this in the new year, is the Rototuna Flagstaff areas, extending and covering areas of growth that there aren't currently services, but also having we've already gone back to almost first principles in in terms of how services are designed for that area. So a lot's changed since when we originally came up with some solutions for that. So that work is trucking along quite nicely. We've just completed quite a comprehensive public survey for that area and getting feedback around how people would like their services to operate. Investigating establishing a 15-minute, so it's sort of in a Hamilton sense, quite a high frequency corridor between the hospital and the base through the CBD. And I think that'll, it's strategically a really good thing to do, and there'll be further details coming to respective committees in due course. We're also really keen to review the future of the CBD shuttle service and sort of three fundamental questions there. Do we retain it, change it, or do something different with that resource as well? So that some concepts are well underway. So I hope I've sort of given a sense that there's a lot of actions underway that's really targeted at turning around the patronage decline. I'm pretty confident that that will occur. We've seen for the stuff that we've implemented already a really positive response. We've been making incremental improvements to the Flagstaff and Rototuna services, and that's now our strongest area of growth within the city. So in terms of patronage increase on services. But across the board, I think once these things land, it will have a positive, really positive impact on patronage. And I think we've the results for this month's just gone. If we've got growth, we'll be in positive territory for the 12 months to 12 months through to this month. So part of, I mean, that's in a nutshell what we've got underway. Really keen to have a conversation around what's the future opportunities for public transport in a Hamilton context. And I think this is really a conversation around mobility, livability, economy and well-being for Hamilton. So it's really integral in terms of how the city's growing and how that growth can be accommodated. So my understanding is, the population of Hamilton's are at around 160,000, and with the potential to increase to 230-odd thousand in 30 years. Good chance we could be higher than that as well. These figures will be really familiar to council because they've come from council. 30,000 new dwellings in 30 years, 11,000 new dwellings in 10 years. So accommodating that kind of growth with in terms of how the transport network's operating at the moment, I think is going to be a really significant challenge for the city. And the challenge for us is how do we accommodate growth and benefit from all the good stuff that comes with that, but keep Hamilton moving at the same time. And we certainly have some suggestions around that as well. So I think growth and really high dominance, 92% of journeys to work are undertaken by car and low occupancy vehicles. You can see the PT mode share in terms of journey to work down the bottom there, which is really low and needs to be a lot higher. I think the prevalence of cars as a main means of travel through peak times is a really challenging problem for the city, and I think ultimately comes down to an allocation of space. So cars take up a lot of space, especially when there's the occupancy of the cars is really low. So I think we average occupancy for cars in Hamilton's well below 2 people per trip. So increasing population. If we're looking at a similar mode share to what we've got now, plus 62,000 over 30 years. Some significant challenges there, and I think my understanding is about 50% of that growth is expected to be infill development, so on networks where space is already really constrained. So I think we collectively have some choices around how we might solve this problem into the future. We can allocate more space and to accommodate cars and reasonable levels of service. We could accept more congestion and delays that come with that. We could try and target more modal shift, or we can try and do a bit of everything. Just carrying on the notion around the relationship of space and cars is this graph. I won't explain it in detail, but it's looking at the space taken up by mode, and you can see the car component there. So what it's really saying is the faster you want a car to go, the more space you need to accommodate that, and that's true by the time you get all the safety shoulders and all the things to accommodate higher speeds. It's really the case, and it gives some analysis around different modes and the space implications for a city of that. This is an example I found quite interesting. I've been fact-checking it, and I think I need to tidy it up a little bit, but the story does remain true. So on the screen you see the big black dot. That's the urban footprint of Atlanta in the US in the 1990 at a population of about 2.5 million. The smaller blob is Barcelona, also in 1990, and it had a population of 2.8 million at that time. So it's really similar populations, but a vastly different story in terms of how those respective cities or wider metropolitan areas have evolved. So the built environment for Atlanta was about 4,000 square kilometres. Barcelona was about 162 square kilometres. The red lines on there are the metro lines, so there are subway lines for those respective cities. In Atlanta, there's 74 kilometres of metro line at that stage. In Barcelona, it was 99 kilometres. And for Atlanta, 60% of the population was in 600 metres of a subway station. Sorry, the other way around. Barcelona and 4% in Atlanta. And this is the bit I find really fascinating. So, transport, so 30% of all transport in Barcelona was undertaken on the metro system. And this is the bit I find really fascinating. So for Atlanta to achieve what Barcelona has done and retrofit its system to achieve the same sort of mode share, it would probably need about 3,000 kilometres of metro line and about 2,000 stations to achieve that, which I find really fascinating. So it's a bit of a story around how cities evolve and the implications of servicing that from infrastructure. So wastewater, various other things would have the same implication of servicing a much larger footprint. So better use of space. Transport has a really key role to play in how a city utilises its space over time. So the congestion problem. So increasing congestion, I think we're all well versed in that, can have economic implications, so slow down productivity. I think the Access Hamilton work to date sort of forecasting by 2045 levels of congestion might have an annualised cost of about 12 million a year type of thing. I think also really importantly how space is utilised in congestion and what we aim for in the future has a really big impact on the livability of cities as well. So every time I meet someone new that's not from Hamilton, I do a bit of a straw poll and I ask them, if you had the choice to locate somewhere, would you choose Hamilton, Tauranga or Dunedin? And they almost, 9 times out of 10 or more, they'll choose Tauranga, and I ask them the reason why, and they say it's because of the beaches and perceptions around amenity type of thing. And I think this is important for a city like Hamilton. So, what's our competitive advantage moving forward? And I think livability's got to be a really key component of that. Talk to anyone that does live in Hamilton, and they think it's a great place to live and work, but it's not necessarily the go-to point. So I think we need to leverage that over time, and housing affordability is a really key one, but ease of commuting and getting around it I think is going to be a really significant factor for Hamilton in the future. So a really fundamental question, how do we accommodate growth and keep Hamilton moving? And I quite like this analogy. So if only people would take the bus, I'd be home now. And that's sort of the problem we face. I think we're at that point in terms of the public transport system where it's a good system, but it doesn't have that value proposition that's really going to convince people to change behaviours. So the question for us is, if we improve the PT system, will people use it? And I think the answer to that is yes, and we've seen that happen in the past. Like we saw that graph, 107% growth over a period off the back of improvements. And to reinforce this, I won't go into the detail, but I'll draw your attention to some of the highlights. This is some perceptions analysis. We've got Versus research to do very recently. This is part of supporting the redesigned routes for Flagstaff and Rototuna. And so we're asking them a number of questions. The extent to which they agreed to a number of statements. So increased use of buses generally would be a good thing for Hamilton, and they were asked to indicate how strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, strongly agree, vice versa. Travel on buses is more affordable than travelling by car. Travel on buses is safer than travelling by car. Travelling by bus is more convenient than travelling by car. And travelling by bus is faster than travelling by car. And what we're really trying to do is understand across existing users and non-users what their perceptions are of public transport. I think it's kicked up some quite interesting things. Yeah. So if we look at those top 3 rows, there's some interesting stuff. So both existing users and non-users, over 90% think public transport or PT buses, increased use of it is a good thing for Hamilton. So I think that's indicating a willingness there around improved services. Over 60% think PT is more affordable than cars, so not as high as what I'd like it to be, but still a good majority. and over 55% think PT is safer than cars. And there were a couple of dimensions to this. There was like, literally it's safer to be on a bus than drive a car, but there was also elements around how safe is it to use the public transport system, and there was a lot of comments and interesting feedback around safety of using stops or perceived safety of using stops and walking home, particularly early in the morning and late at night type of thing. So some really rich information there. The bottom two is our work on, I think, and this is, if we can solve this, this is the value proposition that would significantly increase public transport use over time. So over 77% of respondents think bus travel is less convenient than cars, and over 89 think that travel by bus is slower than cars. I almost expected those figures to be higher than that, but I think that's the issue for us moving forward. How do we address that? And that's the value proposition for people to be more willing to use public transport. And sort of reinforce what it means in terms of space and allocation and mode and what different ways of doing public transport could be for the city. So this is looking at the capacity of one lane, a 3.5 metre lane heading in one direction in a city, so mixed use. Theoretically, you could get about, and based on current sort of occupancy of cars, you get about 2,000 people through in any given hour. A bus is a lot better, a lot higher capacity, so about 9,000 people. Cycling, again, a lower space, smaller amount of space required, so theoretically you can get about 14,000 people for predominantly used for cycling. Pedestrians is really efficient, 19,000 theoretically, and you could imagine busy cities that are really well pedestrianised, and that's what it kind of looks like. Bus priority lanes, so separating buses out from general traffic, we can significantly increase the frequency and throughput, so you're getting up to about 20,000. So thinking about connections to places like the CBD or areas where it's really hard to provide space for parking and the other things, I think this is an opportunity for the future. Light rail, not a huge difference actually between theoretically between buses and bus lanes and light rail, but the infrastructure costs associated with light rail can be quite a bit higher, so interesting thing to look into in more detail. And then heavy rail makes a really big difference in terms of capacity and enabling access to places. So I think there's a notion floating around of what does the future look like for the city in terms of some of these more high capacity modes and the potential to make a difference. I think it's tying two things together, giving people a really strong value proposition to use public transport. So that's in terms of travel time advantage, particularly over congested conditions, so peak times. But I think it's treating these bus, cycling, walking, bus priority measures and the future of rail as a family of interventions and coming up with a really clear and concise vision for the future. To what extent it's achievable is it would be a really interesting actually process to go through. So there's a notion of developing a mass transit plan for the city that might lead to a redefined or redesigned network over time. So we're really keen to engage with that and in partnership with the City Council, have a look at what that might look like. Hopefully I've stuck to that 10-minute window.
Done well.
That's okay.
Okay, let's have some questions. Unless Mike or Russ, you want to say anything at this point? Okay.
No, just box on. Thanks.
Thanks. And I'd like to congratulate Councillor Bunting for getting in ahead of Councillor Mallett this time. Well done.
If it makes it easier, I'll just ask everyone's questions for them if you like.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll roll through it. Thank you. Fascinating, really interesting stuff. Peaks and troughs. I mean, that's what really does a business in, isn't it? The peaks and troughs and having the right capacity, because people will argue they see over full buses or they see empty buses. I didn't see a lot in there that addresses that issue, or do you see it as an issue, or what?
So in terms of, so we often get feedback around, hey, there's a lot of empty buses rolling around outside of peak times. Peak times they're full. At the moment, this comes down to an efficient use of capital. So it costs a lot of money to purchase or secure the vehicles that we do use, and they're really designed for the peak capacity. If we were to operate a separate fleet of smaller vehicles off peak, it's more expensive overall. We effectively need to maintain, purchase and operate 2 fleets of vehicles. So like I totally understand that perception around, hey, this looks inefficient off peak. There's not many people on the bus, but from an economics perspective, it's the most cost-effective way to do it at the moment.
Right. Could you go the other way though and try and actually affect the peaks and troughs rather than the response to it?
Yeah, one of the things we're looking at as part of the fare review project is investigating an off-peak fare. So what that might do is encourage people to use the services in the shoulders in the off-peak period. The ability for that to make a meaningful difference really depends on the ability for people to change travel behaviour. So at the moment on the PT network, the peaks are really driven by school students, so the peak of the peak, which is driving a lot of the capital requirement around vehicles, and they've probably got a really limited ability to change that. It's really determined by the school and start and finish times.
Yeah, that's my next question. What's the situation with school buses? Because wouldn't it make a lot more sense to have kids on buses provided by the schools? I understand, Nick, can you take me back? The Ministry of Education doesn't provide buses, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, so the Ministry of Education, they see themselves as a transport provider of last resort, and they literally use that term. So in areas or places where there's a barrier for children attending school, they'll intervene, and they might provide a bus service, or they might provide a conveyancing allowance or another mechanism to overcome that barrier. They're really clear that in areas where public transport services are provided, then that's their exit.
Right.
And they've implemented that policy around the place as well. Yeah.
So is there an appetite that's looking at the cost of congestion and the risk, obviously, and it's becoming a huge problem? Is there an appetite amongst your group to be funding some buses for schools or working at some sort of scheme?
Yeah, I think for us it comes down to a network design philosophy. So all the buses we operate at the moment are general access, so anyone can get on them and use them. But there are a lot of instances within the network where the buses are predominantly only used for school travel, and they're only put on at school time to cope with that demand. So they are effectively school buses, but we don't necessarily brand them that way.
Right. So is there an appetite for more at all?
More, I think we'll see this play out in terms of the service design options for Flagstaff and Rototuna. So there's a really strong demand emerging there in terms of connections up to the new high school, but also schools back down. And I think we'll see. I think one of the options that, in my opinion, is likely to go ahead is some targeted services to cater for that demand, and a different type of offering that's targeted at people in employment or travelling for other purposes as well.
Cool. The card thing that you're talking about, have you got, like, with these now you go onto a plane and blip, straight away. Is that going to be an option with the app?
No, not with the app. So there's, and Michael will probably speak to this a lot better than myself, there's a development pathway for ticketing. So what we're implementing next year is what we call our interim ticketing solution. So nominally got about a 5-year life.
Yep.
And while we're developing and implementing that, we're also working with a national working group around what comes beyond that. So it's really Auckland Transport and Greater Wellington Regional Council that's driving that. But we're exposed to a pathway that would allow us to transition onto that. So the solution that comes early next year is it's not incapable of it, but from day dot it won't be your phone. You'll still need a smart card to do it. But the pathway for us is that's becoming increasingly the standard, and the expectation of the public is that it's your bank card or it's your phone. It's another device. And those options are all available to us, and we're actively pursuing that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking my teenage daughter, I'm trying to get her to take the bus more and more and more, but it's always, Dad, I've lost my card, I don't know how much is on the card. So we'll be able to see how much is on the card, at least with that. Yeah. But by crikey, if she ever lost a cell phone, it'll be World War III in the house. So, I think it's more guaranteed, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's exciting. The Ruakura route, isn't it the university route?
No, it does go close to the university. There's Route 13, the university route, which goes directly in, and a number of others that also do that.
Oh, okay.
The Ruakura route is was one of the previously Network Review identified it as one of the routes that are there's a lot of other routes that also cover the same kind of area, and it's got relatively low patronage compared to other routes. So, yeah, that resource will be redeployed into primarily northern suburbs improvements.
Yeah. When you talk about the 3% of the people who are using the bus, how does that compare on page 9? How does that compare with cities of a similar size to us?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think off the top of my head, quite similar to Dunedin and Tauranga.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're like, nationally, we've been on a really similar pathway and exposed to the same drivers that are influencing public transport as well.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah. But I think, I think journey to work is one way of looking at it. I think a more equitable way of looking at it is trips per head of population, and that's a better comparator across different centres as well. So we could and will start reporting information around those sorts of metrics as well.
Okay, only 2 more questions, Dave, just very briefly. Ferry transport, is that talked about much?
No, not in my circles, but I think it's come up in the past, and Chris will probably be able to speak to that a lot better than myself, but it's not something that's actively on our radar at the moment in terms of a review of the regional public transport plan.
No, not ferries. No, but I mean, I just think as our congestion gets higher, surely the threshold for looking at that sort of stuff is going to get close.
There's a report that came out in about 2004 or 5 about that here, which we can dig out.
I mean, there's a lot to do, obviously, but you know.
Predated my time here, but I think the barriers to it were
jetties,
park and ride capability around the city, but also the effects on the riverbanks and the wash from the ferries, I think, from memory. But there is a part of substantive report that we could dig out.
I'd be interested to see, because I'm thinking, you know, the Whitianga ferry, for example, doesn't have a heck of a lot of wash and it gets a lot of patronage. You know, if we're talking about park and ride across to Claudelands, probably a discussion for another time, but I'm just wondering if it's coming up much. Because it seems to be like Auckland now, it's becoming a really viable transport route across the harbour, as opposed to using the roads and buses. That'll do for me. Thanks. There's a lot of questions.
Yes,
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, from a political viewpoint, my fellow councillors and Paula would have had exactly the same problem. It's a lot of it's kind of, I guess, it's ignorance, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. Is these big buses, kind of 60-seaters, but with 5 or 6 people in it, they're like bloody broken records as they condemn, you know, the public transport in the city. But A, it goes out for tender. B, we don't own the buses. Go Bus came in with a cheaper tender than ever before, with superior buses, and also made in New Zealand. And you'll see on October 1, Councillor Bunting, they were fantastic. But it is a perception thing.
Yeah.
So what do? Do you line up those 60 buses between 10 and 3 o'clock till the school buses come on, and cost more as far as the tender's concerned to bring on 20-seater coaches? It is an issue. It's perception. Yeah. But it is the big buses lumbering around too, you know, around the little suburban streets too. So there is a I think a legitimate concern there. The second point politically is that the school buses, and I think you alluded to it, and more than alluded to it, you know, is what they're doing. This government, of course, they're trying to kick it off their balance sheet onto ours or yours, and you just wonder, how, you know, the fairness of that. Yeah. Certainly the regional council and your council have certainly, as they've tried to get out of it completely in the last year, we've certainly brought them to heel on that. But as we look forward to the review of public transport in the city, the positive news is the University of Waikato have really been on board for a couple of years, and that's to be absolutely commended, plus Wintec, plus particularly the DHB, for right through not only the city but the rural areas. But this point, the Minister of Education have been conspicuous by their absence around the table. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. Gary?
Thank you. What's the goal? This has all been based on public transport, but what that's a subset of the bigger issue, which is getting around the city, eh? Is that right?
Absolutely. So the draft Access Hamilton stuff is merging with some targets around mode share and a lot more.
But hang on, you goals around mode share. Who cares how people get around, so long as they get around? Is the goal we want the most efficient, safest, economical transport network we can have, or we want to squeeze people onto buses? What's the goal?
Yeah, I think the former. So we don't provide buses just for the sake of providing buses or public transport service. There's definitely a higher purpose to that. In my mind, it's definitely how do we accommodate growth and benefit from that in a way that keeps the city moving. And I think public transport's definitely got to play a bigger role in that, particularly at times.
Sorry. Is there you had your surveys and that sort of stuff, but the only survey that really counts is what people do in the day, isn't it? It's whether they get in the car, or they ride a bike, or they ride a bus, or they walk or skateboard. So if people are still prepared to pay the cost, and there is a cost in congestion, you lose some time and there's a little bit of petrol you're chewing up while you're waiting in the queue, but clearly people still prefer that and the freedom and all the other things and the convenience of having their own car and that sort of stuff than they do with the public transport thing, or the biking or the cycling or walking or whatnot. Sorry, Russ, and I know that you are just a subset of this thing called our transport network, so I'm not expecting you to have to talk, but you're well, I guess you're not arguing, but you're putting forward a case.
The proposition.
Yeah.
Then I think, Councillor Mallett, it's this, that the figures that have been given today by Andrew, that this will have 200,000 people within the next 30 years. And I have a bet that in the next 15 years it'll be that. I think it's just growing at such a rate now. And I think if we continue not to be good governors and to look at the future, as Auckland did not, because they didn't invest in public transport or light rail, it's there for all to see. The place is actually gridlocked. And quite contrary to what Councillor Tooman feels, I just look at the time I've been in here in the last 50 years, but particularly in the last 3 years, the way that the streets are really the backup right through Cobham Drive and to the north. And I've seen it in Tauranga East, though, it's absolutely the bottom of the Kaimai Hills. I think that there is a role, an important role, to ensure that we try and get over that 8.9% perception where the public think buses are slow, and they are. And one of the roles I believe that your council and we together have to look at dedicated bus lanes, so persons are going to have a quicker, safer, less costly journey, because with the growth of the city, I don't think it can continue without having a more superior public transport system. That's my view.
Okay.
Gary, I just want to say that when you mentioned subset, we've included the Regional Council and the NZTA in all our discussions on the future transport policy deliberately, because we don't see them subsets, they're all part of the picture. Yeah.
And I bang on about this all the time, but I think we need to just think that when we have transport, there's a whole lot of things that go into that. It's your golf clubs in the back or your gym gear in the back. It's being able to leave the minute you want to go, not waiting for a bus. It's able to drop kids off and then, halfway home, mum rings up and says, can you get some milk from the dairy? That sort of stuff, All of those things is what the buses are competing against. So it's more than just having a natty little what do you call those things, app and the pricing. There's a whole lot of stuff which I think is probably for most people more important than the price. Well, clearly people are prepared to invest $50,000 in a car, all the maintenance, all the registration, all that sort of stuff. They still choose that thing. And I just wonder, and this. I don't know if you're the right guys to ask, but whether people are talking about. Do you think would it be considered a success if bus patronage dropped, but a whole lot of people started using ride sharing, Uber, Lyft, that sort of stuff, whether it's driverless or not, all that stuff's coming. To what extent? Because it's here. I don't know if it's in Hamilton, but it's certainly in New Zealand. I don't know to what extent that will make a change, and you know, a lot of new technologies promise way more than they deliver, but it seems that this stuff's been working for 3 or 4 years overseas and has been working in Auckland for at least a year, I'm aware of it, maybe more, and it's certainly not ubiquitous, and there's not tons of people using these things, but are we at risk of kind of, I know how buses work, so buses are the answer, and we're forgetting that this other stuff is coming along, and that has implications with regards to you may not need anywhere near as much parking ability, because you know these things tend to be drop off and then bugger off and pick up other people, and they will generally be more than one person in the car. There'll be a lot of ride sharing. So I mean, I just throw that into the mix because I get sort of concerned that I think most people, I'm not telling anyone that anything they don't know, that you know there is going to be a big change in technology in the way we travel, and I don't think it's a decade away. I think it's a lot closer than that, and I just worry that we're suggesting we're going to invest in something that, with all due respect, I think is probably last century's technology, perhaps buses. I'm not sure if that's the case, but anyway.
So I certainly have a number of thoughts around that, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it as well. So 2 parts to the question. One is, as I understood it.
Yeah, well, just how much have we factored that into the report and?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the suggestions and whatnot.
So the breakthrough technology in terms of ride sharing is the likes of Uber and Lyft and Zoomy and others, and they've been operating for a long time in really large cities throughout the world, cities that have really comprehensive public transport systems, and I think they still have really comprehensive public transport systems and will continue to do so. So it's about, and I think the driver and the move towards more, so if I go back a step, our network design at the moment is sort of a mix between moving a lot of people as efficiently as possible and objectives around social coverage, so enabling people that might not otherwise be able to travel in a car to access employment, education, healthcare, that type of thing, and that's driven a lot of our network design. So we've got routes that sort of meander's not the right word, but we cover a lot of things. A mass transit type of approach is more about moving a lot of people as cheaply and as efficiently as possible, and that has the benefits for the city in terms of how it might grow and space is allocated over time. The likes of ride sharing don't really, I mean, they have the potential to make a significant difference, but they're still reliant on a lot of small vehicles moving around. So to an extent, we don't get away from that capacity challenge over time. It certainly makes an improvement around how space is utilised, but for an urban area that's significantly growing, that on its own won't be enough. But certainly that in conjunction with a transport system, a public transport system that can move a lot of people, I think is really critical. I think another part to your question was if these technologies, and Uber has declared that it's going to set up in Hamilton as well, so we will see in the very near future. Another component to your question was around if these things worked really well and public transport declined, would that be seen as a failure or a success? And I don't. I think for us it's about. It's that higher purpose around growth and how people move and maximising well-being for people, and whatever the most effective way to achieve that is what we should be chasing.
I think, Gary, the point's really a very valid one too. Rather than just banging on about kind of buses, you've got a flat city, you've got the opportunity for cycleways that unfortunately have been neglected for the last 20 years. The paint's worn off, and it's not a good reflection on this council, if I may say, over the last few years. So Access Hamilton, they're well beyond just looking at the buses. It's really just saying the best to move persons that want to do it as well, whether it be electric bikes, with dedicated cycle lanes to the university, to the Peacocks area, as you're planning that at the present time. And I look at a city like Vienna, where my son-in-law and daughter live. I mean, I guess probably 3/4 of the persons move by just on their cycles, because it's a flat city, and you dare kind of go against the light that they've got the control for, a fairly strong German blood, and you don't really kind of argue with them. You get knocked out.
We did beat them, Russ.
I reminded them that on
Twice.
I reminded them that on Sunday. But I often think, public transport, yes, just buses, but the city is growing, and the opportunity, as this we come, I think the second biggest city in New Zealand, the opportunities now to ensure that we can have transport systems beyond the car and beyond bus.
And just one other question. When you factor in your calculations, things like Uber and Lyft and that sort of stuff, they quite probably would suggest that a lot of families will only need one car rather than two, which is just my guesstimate. I'm not 100% sure that's going to happen. But also it has the beauty of it's totally user pays. So there is no requirement for subsidy. So in your capacity as a ratepayer, you don't have to pay for it. In your capacity as someone who wants to use a service, you pay for it, of course. But that is another major factor that needs to be included in the sort of calculations when we do this stuff.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. And just reminding councillors, we're not supposed to be debating with them. We're supposed to be asking questions. We'll give an opportunity for the debate when we do the wrap-up motion. Angela, thanks.
I always ask questions.
I know. Oh, but that wasn't directed at you, mind you.
I know.
Someone else.
Look, if ever there was a thing for rail, support for rail, that page is it. But can you just explain to me, so I'm on page 18 of the slides, how you calculate, you've got the irregular bus 9,000, and this is people throughput per direction per hour, and then that jumps significantly up 18,000 people if we had dedicated bus lanes throughout the city. Can you just explain to me how that happens?
Yes. Two columns are assuming sort of mixed use roads, so still cars, still still walking, cycling, all those things sharing the same corridor. So there's a physical limitation around what you could actually get through a corridor that is sharing it.
Right, so because bus lanes are for buses only. Okay, that's great, thank you. Just a question on your surveys. Are you aware that we do community surveys of areas? And in the last ones that we did, one of the questions we asked was around access to buses and also conditions. And the West Hamilton, Frank de Myra, Dinsdale, had the lowest satisfaction with conditions of buses and access to routes. So do you factor that in to your strategies and things?
So the survey work that this council does? Yeah, we're absolutely certainly aware of it, and we use that in combination with a range of other stuff that we're doing as well. So it's really useful stuff, and the value of the work I think that the City Council's doing is it's a repeatable measure over time, which is hugely useful.
Yes, it gives us trend data. What areas of the city are the highest users?
So in terms of patronage, it's the eastern side of the city, particularly south of Wairere Drive. But context is everything. At the moment, the Rototuna Flagstaff areas is pretty much generating all the patronage growth at the moment on services that are growing.
So that's quite interesting because that's at odds with our latest community surveys that we did in, I think, 2015. So that's obviously a significant shift for them.
Something to explore there, yeah.
Because they were the least that used buses. Can I just ask...
You said something south of...
Wairere Drive.
Wairere Drive. I thought you said a contradiction then. Just what did you say?
So south of Wairere Drive, so Hamilton East, so basically the southeastern portion of the city is the busiest part of the public transport system, both in terms of origin and destination, ignoring the CBD, but that's where most of the routes come into. North of Wairere Drive has lower use of public transport, but that's more of a function of how the services and networks configured at the moment, and we've incrementally made improvements to the the Rototuna Flagstaff services over the last 3 years, and those patronage is responding to that, so it's double-digit growth on
you're setting bigger growth out there. Sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Sorry, Angela.
With the rollout of your smart technology, and you're obviously aware of our review of Access Hamilton, what in terms of our bus shelter infrastructure, which is, you know, all sorts of flavours and colours and conditions, what are you going to be wanting from us?
At the moment, in terms of integrating technology with bus shelters.
Yeah, and also condition, because you've highlighted that, you know, the experience and condition of the service. Well, that starts at the bus shelter, doesn't it, or bus stop?
Quite right. So two separate things there. In terms of real-time information displays, I think we've got a solution that we can implement. They attach to bus stop poles, and but that's quite separate. Quality, end-to-end journey experience is really important. So that starts at the home or wherever someone's going to initiate a journey from, and it starts from understanding how do you actually use the system, right through to, you know, getting to your stop, accessing the bus, travelling on the bus, and doing. Chances are they're going to do the return journey at some other time in the day. So we're consistently getting really quite positive and increasing quality, high levels of user satisfaction with the on-bus component of the journey. But I think the access to stops is a really big work-on area for us. So we do an annual satisfaction survey that asks questions. We survey 1,000 users every year that ask questions targeted at different aspects of the journey. So in summary, like 1 in 3 people, gave a score that they were dissatisfied with the quality of accessing stops and infrastructure. That's a really critical component of more effective public transport system.
Yeah. Okay. And final question, just out of interest, why the new buses? Some of the new buses look like the front of trucks. Was that something that you had anything to do with, or they're quite ugly? Not that. Are they called trusses?
Yeah. So nothing to do with us. So we don't use any of those truck buses or trusses on public services. Okay. They're used on Ministry of Education services primarily.
Right. Okay. Yeah, trusses.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Dave. Welcome, Andrew, Russ, and Mike. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
The ticketing system that is coming in next year, can you just clarify for me, that ticketing system will allow you to use the same ticket for Te Awamutu bus, say, as well as the city services? Because at the moment that's a problem for people.
Yeah.
So they'll all be...
Absolutely. So it can be utilised on any public transport service in the Waikato, but it'll also make the journey better. So at the moment, if you're coming in on a Te Awamutu or Cambridge service, you need to pay another fare when you get onto a Hamilton bus. Under the new ticketing system, that'll just be a seamless journey. So you tap on at the start, and then you tap off as you get off the bus, tap onto another bus, and you can make a seamless transfer without any additional fare being applied.
Right, and that's from next year, yeah?
That's from next year.
Brilliant.
The system's also interoperable with the 8 other regions that are part of the consortium that's procured it, but unfortunately it doesn't include Auckland and Wellington, but certainly the Bay of Plenty, Otago, and pretty much everywhere in between you'll be able to use the same card. Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. And Russ, you mentioned the dedicated bus lanes, and I certainly agree with that. In our discretionary transport program in this meeting, actually, we've got, on the program, we're talking about a dedicated bus lane at the Anglesea Street Anzac Parade roundabout there. And so that's something we're talking about today. Do you have any other sort of high priority sites where you think a bus lane might be essential?
My view, my personal view is that the university to the CBD, that's the crucial one I think that you need to for mass transit, look at, and then to Hillcrest, and also in your planning into Peacock. But the example I'd like to use is the field days, where you get 30,000 visitors per day at field days, and we struggle to get bloody people, onto the buses. It's certainly not farmers wanting to get on buses, it's just against their DNA. But when the buses are full, streaming at twice the speed, and you're half an hour and right into the field day site, you all of a sudden said, I'm going to get a bus because at least I can you know, get there half an hour earlier, you get an hour extra to see the field days. And I know Councillor Tooman and the great work he did there for 20, 30 years. The early days, they were in just with the lining up, and then we had the dedicated where they could legally go alongside the bus at 30, 40k, and the others gridlocked there for half an hour. That told the people in the cars, hey, there is a better way. And if we can replicate that, or you can replicate that, in some corridors in the city, I think that you'll find that public transport will grow exponentially.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, you got another one?
Yeah, sorry. Just about there, I won't take long. There's I've got my ones first. In the parking task force, we've had a few just discussions, just batting around the idea of how do we accommodate long-term parkers in the city, particularly given what's coming in October. And there's been some talk about, say, park and rides, you know, maybe at Claudin's or something like that. What would the regional council's response be to the idea of you know, peak hour shuttle services with, you know, for something like that, for a park and ride? Would it be something you're open to and funding? And
it's a good issue to cover in a mass transit plan, and potentially as part of the review of the regional public transport plan, which has got representation from this council on as well. So, yeah.
Politically?
Well, it's got to be applauded, you know, but it's what this meeting's about, looking and dedicating park and ride, and that Councillor Leary was, you know, alluding to the heavy rail, and again, it's got to have park and ride. It's no good trying to walk 22k or get your partner to drop you off. It ain't going to happen. Park and ride is, I think, a vital part of our next stage in regard to making public transport more usable and palatable to the public.
Okay, thank you. Just last question about the night rider service. Obviously, we're all aware that there's issues on some nights, or probably most nights, on a Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday morning sort of thing. And I've had people say to me that they just think one of the answers would be getting better transport out of your Hood Street, your Anglesey Street, your Victoria Street at 3:30 in the morning, that type of thing. Is the night rider actually doing that job sufficiently well at the moment, or do we need to could we look at extending the hours maybe? I don't know, putting a security guard on a couple of buses and just ferrying people away? Is any work gone into that?
Yeah, so it's been on our to look at list for quite a while, and it'd be a good one to pick up and look at. Prior to my time being involved, there were a number of changes made to the night rider service, and I think those changes haven't been successful. So patronage has declined really significantly on those services, and partly because they provide a service, but it's really, really infrequent. So it's good if you happen to be leaving at that particular moment. I think my personal view is we could do that service a whole heap more effectively and potentially expand the concept into other areas. So more of a on-demand or demand-responsive type of service, and that's particularly maybe an example where that smaller vehicle type of concept could work a lot better.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Paula.
Thank you. I'll keep my questions quite short because a lot of them have been asked. In fact, one of them was around just demand-responsive modes, and were there any plans to trial any demand-responsive services? Because we've been talking about that. You know, of course, Gary mentioned the advent of Uber, and that's a demand-responsive service. I suppose that taxis are also. But is there any thinking? Would it be the night rider, or what would it be if you were to roll out?
There's no formal plans to trial something, but there's certainly a lot of thinking going on behind the scenes. So we're actively investigating the technology that would allow us to manage services in real time. So that might be rerouting services and responding to the demand. If we've got a good communication channel that allowed us to have visibility of where people and when they want to travel. So there's actually a lot of off-the-shelf solutions, but there's also the potential to look to the likes of Uber and other technology providers and see if there's scope for a collaborative sort of solution. Whether there is or not, I don't know, but I'd really be keen to have that conversation with them.
Okay, because we have been talking about demand responsive in the plan for a long time. But anyway, and I think Russ, you're right around the university to the CBDs, and someone raised that about priority lanes. I think it was Jeff mentioned that. I'm just wondering how we're going with our conversations that had already begun with the university about significant improvements to their interchange, therefore making the bus services through and around the university so much. How's that going? Is it going all right?
Yes, I think Chris has recently had a discussion about that, and we're certainly well engaged in that conversation. And my perception is the university's been fantastic in this regard, really open around how they want to develop, and potentially putting PT at the heart of that as well.
Oh, that's been good. That's been 2 years of work.
So they've engaged consultants to look at that, so that conversation's well advanced, and they really are focused on the PT aspect of it.
Great. It's always nice to know that you can make progress over these things, even if they take time. Short question, can we have the slides? Because I think there's a lot of really good information I'd like to come back to. Are we able to have those slides? Would be great.
We'll get staff to email it out.
That would be good in a digital form.
It's on the site if you want to log on and get it.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. You've talked a little bit about peacocks and the timing, so you're aware of the considerable growth plans for Hamilton. Just in terms of getting transport infrastructure in and services in a timely fashion, is that a consideration for Regional Council in their long-term plan? Or certainly is for us in our long-term plan.
Yes, so in terms of the public transport plan is currently under review, and we're seeing the Access Hamilton strategy as a key input into that, and certainly part of that in terms of mode share change and also dealing with growth. So really we need to understand where that's going and feed that line in terms of our planning, so very much aware of that, but need to understand the implications. So that's on our level of service issues for the long-term plan.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure your level of service discussions were parallel with our level of service discussions. The last thing, because a lot of my questions have been answered, is you're aware of some systems in Tauranga around intermodal transportation. They're looking quite forward-thinking around how all of these modes connect with each other, and driving quite an aggressive modal share shift is what I've seen through some of the designs. In fact, there's somebody who'd like to talk to council. Ziggy's been speaking with him. So, are you looking at those kind of trends as well? Vis-a-vis, I don't want to just remain in competition with the main mode, which is the car. What are we doing about creating a completely fit-for-purpose made intermodal system?
Yeah, and I think this is exactly it. So maybe some centres are a bit more further advanced than what we are, but I think there's a priority action identified in the Access Hamilton around developing a mass transit plan, and I think that's exactly the type of thing that plan would provide a view on.
Okay, thank you. And good to hear about the Night Rider review.
Thanks. Siggy, thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thanks for reminding me about Germans. No, it's just fun. That's right. Just a couple of questions about, I'm just seeing the Orbiter increased 15-minute frequency Monday to Friday. I mean, is that possible, especially under heavy high traffic times? And my husband was the manager for the Orbiter for a number of years, and you could find them for being late, but how can you not be late when the traffic is so heavy? So how is that going to work?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a promise to people, but how can you hold it?
Yeah, no, exactly right. So there's quite a number of dimensions to that, and some of them are quite detailed. Probably the most important one for this committee, though, is the single biggest corridor in the city that affects the reliability of the Orbiter service, which is the most busiest service in the city, is that Clyde Street through to Hukanui and Peachgrove Road. And it is really, really difficult at peak times to keep the services flowing effectively. So if there was the number one opportunity in terms of PT priority measures, even in bits along that corridor, that would make a significant difference in terms of the reliability of that service. There's things we can do to an extent to manage that, so insert additional buses at critical times to keep the frequency up in anticipation of traffic. But what we find with traffic, and I'm sure you'd see this coming through in your own traffic information, is it can be quite variable. So we know generally peak times are going to be busy, but the extent to the travel time delay that we can get on corridors can vary from day to day, and it's really difficult to have a public timetable that anticipates that. In fact, it's impossible. It's how we operate the service.
Yeah, it's just sometimes we promise something and then we can't hold it, and then the people wondering what the heck is going on. That's sort of something. The other thing I want to ask is, you've got there the transport future of opportunities, and have you got any goals around that? Because at the moment it's 92% cars and only 3% walking and 2% PT. Have you got any higher goals set that for the next 5 years or 10 years? I know it's hard to predict, but it's always good to have a vision and a goal that to work towards.
Inspirational one, you're right.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we're looking to jointly land that via the Access Hamilton strategy. So once that's confirmed and adopted, that's what we'll be pointing to as what we're trying to hit.
The last question is just what Councillor Paula said about Tauranga, and I've been talking to Mark Wassong. You know Mark Wassong? He there was something on the news in do I say that right? Wassong. He's South African, and he put something. It was something in the paper in April, 25th of April 2017, on bold vision for Tauranga public transport includes bike and bus lanes, and I just thought, have a look, if you had a look at that, what he put out there, that might be quite helpful for what we could do here in Hamilton.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Leo.
I noticed the patronage started to flatline 208, 209. Does that correspond with the opening of Wairere Drive?
Yes, to an extent. So we did some quite detailed analysis around, so the Orbiter service and the CBD shuttle service combined account for half of the total patronage decline across all of Hamilton, but the Orbiter does carry a lot of patronage. So we really honed in on the Orbiter service in particular to look at the reasons why that declined. And there's a really, when you graph it and look at it, there's a really close association with the Wairere Drive opening through to Ruakura Road, and that's when the decline in the Orbiter patronage started becoming really notable. It's not because Wairere Drive came through, but I think it's certainly a factor. That was a really noticeable thing for the city in terms of becoming easier to drive on that part of the corridor.
So the more lanes we put in, the quicker we fill them up with cars, and as a result, cars go down. Yeah. The 15-minute corridor between the base and the hospital, I see that this here will be a great thing for people having to visit the hospital. Instead of them go around 28 ramps on the car park building, they'll be able to get off the bus and then return later. So that'll probably see a sort of a park and ride sort of start out at the base so that people can come back and forth into the hospital. And just a final question, you probably don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but in October we're going to introduce 2 hours free parking. Do you think that'll also see a decline in the number of bus patronages at the same time?
My view is the nature of what's proposed in terms of the parking, it's probably more likely to be neutral, so it's in terms of impact. So my understanding of it, if I've understood it correctly, is that it poses a bit of a limit. It's encouraging short stay type of parking and then discouraging longer stay. And then the people working in the CBD is probably a bread and butter in terms of patronage, so I don't see it affecting that too much.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah. Was that the answer you wanted, Leo?
No, it's not the answer I wanted.
Whoops. Hey, look, I was just going to go to Rob next because he hasn't had a shot, then come to you, Gary. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate that. Just going back to your graph on past performance, which is on my page 2, you state there Hamilton bus patronage, is that where patrons actually board the bus, irrespective of where they're going?
Yeah, so it's just looking at boardings only.
So they could end up in Te Awamutu, for example, but you count that as one person who has boarded a bus in Hamilton, so we get the tick, do we? We get the tick for that one.
It's a good question. So this graph is just looking at boardings on services that are wholly within Hamilton.
Oh, so it doesn't include the Te Awamutu
Correct, yeah.
one, even though it might be a Hamiltonian going to Te Awamutu. Okay. So how do you pick those up then? You know, I mean, is that, how do you avoid the double counting that might arise from the Te Awamutu person who comes in, who boards a bus in Te Awamutu and comes into Hamilton?
So with our current ticketing system, which is well and truly at the end of its life, we can only see boardings. We don't know where people are getting off. Under the new ticketing system, it's tag on, tag off, so we can see exactly where people are boarding and exactly where they're getting off. At the moment, we just associate patronage with Hamilton for services that are wholly within Hamilton or trips that only operate wholly within Hamilton.
So basically get on the bus in Hamilton and get off the bus in Hamilton. Yeah,
correct,
okay.
yeah.
Well, there's a different Te Awamutu or Raglan service, totally different bus. So they're counted as though they, even if they did happen to get off in Hamilton, they're counted as a regional service, not as a...
Okay. The question was around the fact that it says total boardings, which
but if that passenger, Te Awamutu, gets off the transport centre and gets on another bus within Hamilton, that would be a Hamilton boarding?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just,
Okay, thank you for that. Where in that graph does the school bus service, you know, where the ministry took away the bus services around the city, which connected to the schools, when was that removed? And was it removed somewhere in that period of 05 to 09, where we had the significant increase, or was it?
I'm not sure. So there was. We might be talking about different things. I think the ministry initially identified, relatively recently identified, 10 routes that they were looking at withdrawing. And long story short, they're going to retain it.
So they still operate their bus service independent of those students who might get on a bus and pay for it and end up at a school somewhere in Hamilton.
Yes.
Okay.
Rob, back in the late 2000s, the ministry used to give transport budget or component to the high schools. Fraser High, I remember, had a $30,000 one, and they used to subsidise their own Fraser bus in conjunction, I think, with Sacred Heart or a couple of other high schools, and they put it in to subsidise it. And that money was actually withdrawn by the ministry from the schools, therefore, because the Orbiter was servicing those particular schools.
Okay.
That happened around 2007 and 8, because there was a trench of them happening there. They also pulled some regional services at the time. When the Raglan bus came on, they pulled some services that were, for instance, covering Whara area.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. I wasn't aware. The graph is showing sort of a downward trend from about 2008 onwards, and you haven't presented today any predictions as to where, given all of the future, where you think that graph is predicted to go, say, up to 2021. Without having that graph here, have you got an idea? Is it continuing to go down?
No. My prediction, and famous last words, my prediction, I think we're doing enough to turn around the patronage decline, so we should see growth. In the absence of sort of enhancing the value proposition for people, so that's that travel time and convenience component that comes with PT priority measures, like if we were doing better than population growth, a bit better than population growth, that's pretty good. So we could project that over time, but even that would rely on just a continuous program of making improvements and refinements over time. Yeah.
So have you got targets in terms of what might happen to that graph in the next sort of 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so the number one priority for us is arrest the decline, and I think we're very close to doing that.
So get it flat, get the graph going flat for the next...
No, get it growing.
So in our current year budget 17-18, we've budgeted a 2% increase. We've currently got the PT plan review underway, And the Access Hamilton strategy will really drive that. And so I guess the message coming from Andrew, if we want to, if we've got modal shift, there's a number of things that need to happen to drive that. So we can't set patronage targets or growth targets in isolation with the Access Hamilton, and that's why we're working really strongly to actually align those and align that strategy and align into our LTPs.
So you're positive that the discussions that you're having along with Access Hamilton will help arrest that decline and allow for at least a flat line or a growth line?
I think we're confident that we've flatlined the decline, so patronage, the decline's decreased. We've seen some small increases. In terms of those service enhancements that are coming online, we're confident we will see some increase, but any significant increase relies on modal shift change. Modal shift change needs some of the things that we've talked about, and so those conversations are underway.
Yep. So incentivising, in other words.
Well, incentivising, but making bus transport easier, the priority lanes and those sorts of things. So it requires a regional council and city council having combined strategies and actions to deliver that. Okay.
So the long-term subsidy, you know, because I know that we all Hamilton, you know, most of the rate that we pay to Waikato Regional Council is, or predominant share is the transport subsidy. Do you see that, is that predicted to increase, given, even despite the fact that, you know, we're all aiming to increase the bus patronage and presumably increase bus revenue, but of course we've got increasing costs coming through with the new buses and all of the other infrastructure that's necessary to make it better than what it is. So is it realistic that we should be expecting increases in that subsidy which will need to be picked up from future rates?
The way I read it, the current government, and not trying to sound a smart ass, but it's, you know, up to September the 23rd, and things may change after that. The new contracts came in cheaper than the previous, and that enabled, that's with the new buses that the Go Bus paid 100%. So when they're rolled out in the city, the rural ones are already rolled out now, there's a common livery, there is the rise and fall in regard to not the fares, but the entrance and exit, the egress of the bus, the internal monitors, the real-time displays on the bus stops themselves, the new ticketing system, Councillor Pascoe, plus Waikato Regional Council are putting 100k up to promote these new services as from the 1st of October. In the last 3 months, it has bottomed out. There is no decline in the last 3 months. I appreciate that one swallow doesn't make a summer, but I have more piranhas in the Waikato Regional Council delighting if passenger transport in some mines declines, and it is, I'm confident it is flatlining now. Not only confident, the stats show that, and I think what has been rolled out on the 1st of October will continue to arrest that. But obviously your rating base as you build new houses is going to be spread as well. Yeah, sure. So I don't think the per household will be paying any more. The volume may be more, but obviously your rating base is increasing at the same time. So I think we are blessed with this person on my left. He was the Chief Financial Officer in this council until Waikato Regional Council poached him. For him to be able to come on to public transport, you think why? Yeah, I think he's one of the brightest persons in our council. And Andrew, that we poached, and Andrew, we poached from your council here. So I think the new staff, and is it Susie? She got the top award. She's based in the Regional Transport Centre. And I think the staffing, the buses, the livery, and the prices haven't gone up, plus the review that we're doing, plus Access Hamilton. I think we can do a lot better, but I think we're certainly on the, I think it's fantastic.
Thanks, Councillor Remington. Obviously, we've got to poach him back somehow now, don't we? Thank you.
Better to use him as a spy in that organisation. Secret agent. Gary, thanks.
Yeah, just a safety one first. Your graph of boardings, presumably we have just as many disembarkments, do we?
Hopefully there's the same number of people getting off.
Oh, okay. And just, did you guys have any problems parking your bikes?
I walked here.
Pardon?
Yeah, I walked here.
Did you walk? Oh, congratulations. You are the two?
Oh, no, well, I've just had open heart surgery, Councillor Mallet, so the bike's parked up. I'll never tell a lie.
Oh, good.
It's only 2 months.
We've got an electric bike you can borrow to go back with, Russ. Okay, thanks, councillors. What I want to do now is give people, if they really want, especially if they haven't asked questions that were really speeches, to have a quick say. Now, just the resolution is the one on page 869 that the committee received the report. I would like to add, and thanks the WRC delegation for their presentation and discussion. So if we just add that to it, and I'll move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, and that we ask the Regional Council to return with an update report on to the Growth and Infrastructure Committee meeting on the 5th of the 12th, 5th of December. So we thought about every 4 months or so, 3 times a year. That sounds all right. So that's the 2017. Thank you, Gary. Gary's our train spotter nowadays. So I'll move that. It's been seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'm just going to really briefly say something that before we had the drop-off in patronage, when you see that graph under past performance, other councils in the country were actually flocking to Hamilton and the Waikato to see how we were doing it, because the councils in rural areas and regional areas had almost negligible bus services at that stage. Tauranga didn't even have one proper public bus service, and they came over to see how ours was getting cracking. And I think that was a credit to all the people involved at that time, because we were growing faster than anywhere else in the country for quite a number of years. And then unfortunately we tailed off. But one of the things that drove that was actually the new services we put in. It was this council's idea to put in the Orbiter bus, and believe it or not, for a council it took about 5 months from the idea first coming up to it actually starting. And it was an overnight success, and that's particularly, but also the CBD shuttle and some others drove those increases hard right from the start. Everyone got in behind it, and that's the sort of message I'd like to put forward now, that if we can get some new services, some improved services, and drive it hard, we're actually going to make a material difference. We did it before, we can do it again. One of the things about Auckland's public transport, even though the city is a basket case for getting around, if you actually look at their rail transport at the moment, that's also going up at the same sort of level that our bus service used to, because they're really getting in behind it and pushing it, because they have to, probably. But that's at least one success story. Some people have suggested that the new tunnel in the west is a success story. Well, it will be for maybe 18 months, 24 months. You wait until it fills up and see how much of a success story it is, waiting for 15 minutes inside the tunnel to try and get through something that should take you 2 minutes to get through, because that's what will happen there with the amount of car transport they've got up there. A lot of people worry, and Gary's sort of worried, that we're promoting buses at the expense of cars, which is what people really want. I'm paraphrasing, I'm not saying he said those words, but even in the Access Hamilton document we're working on at the moment, we're still talking about, in 2030, I think it is, having 80% private car usage in the city. So we're not saying that's down from the 92% in here, but it's not saying that people are going to be driven out of their cars, as it were. It's simply saying that we have to provide alternatives to cope with growth. And we haven't been doing such a good job of it recently, but we're going to crack on as soon as we can. I think one of the game changers that is being looked at, and Andrew mentioned, is the north-south shuttle service, I call it, between the base, CBD and hospital, basically connecting those 3 centres at such a frequency that you won't need a timetable. You'll probably see one disappearing in the distance as the next one comes around the corner. That'll be the objective there, and they are 3 very high origin destination places in the city, and they're going to actually increase the usage of services dramatically. And I think we saw when the Orbiter service increased and you had these flash new buses there and they were full at peak times, people also started looking at the other services. So a good new service will help the other services, help the image of the other services as well. So I think this is going to be a success story for both councils and NZTA over the next 5 or 6 years, and hopefully a lot longer still. Give us some breathing space so that our roads don't clog up and it doesn't cost us a fortune to build new roads all the time. Anyway, that's my say. I've got Councillor Mark. Yeah. Please, yes. Is that... Brendan, we'll do that while Mark's speaking. I thought all of the above.
Just to receive the...
Okay, we'll organise that. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Look, thank you for your report. It's exciting to see you guys pushing ahead. I take on board Siggy's comments about being future thinking, and we're in a unique position in Hamilton. We're not just a flat city. We've got a jolly big thing in the middle of it called a river. And that poses some very unique unique dynamics with our transport systems, because we've got 5 or 6 bridges, and they are skinny bridges, and they ain't going to grow in a great hurry. And apart from Peacock, we haven't got a great many more planned. So it does put us in quite a unique position, because I often hear the argument we're just a small rural city, but actually, because of those little funnel ways in there, that makes us a rather large city with a rather large problem. Look, I'll do anything I can to help with PT or bicycles or whatever it is to keep going through. So I'm really excited about the app, which I think is absolutely brilliant, and I think it's a really exciting way to get people involved in an innovative service. Look, the bottom line is the future ain't what it used to be, and keep pushing forward. Uber is coming, and it's coming very, very soon. And while I think it does potentially reduce the amount of cars that people may have in their houses, it still doesn't get rid of the problem of cars on bridges, because Uber is still cars. So buses are going to be the only real indoor transport that's going to fix that. We're not going to get a heavy rail system in Hamilton in the near future, I'd imagine. And please, please, please don't underestimate or think I'm being flippant about ferry transport either. And we're not talking about something the size of the River Explorer we've got there at the moment. I was more thinking of the lines of the Whitianga ferry. If there are park and rides, then let's get unique, let's get exciting, let's get attractive, and get walking in ferries as well. So great work, and really excited to see what you come up with next.
Thanks, Mark. Martin, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very excellent presentation. I first of all want to pay tribute to our former Mayor, Russ Rimmington, who happens to be in the room at the moment as well, for his leadership in I believe, with Councillor Dave McPherson showing good political leadership. I remember with great fondness the opening of the bus and public transport centre. And I have a clear message to my colleagues, and you know my views. Thank goodness a dedicated Transport Committee is back. Thank goodness we have people who have the portfolio of Transport Minister, Dave McPherson, Jeff Taylor, Leo, as a team, because I believe in portfolios. I believe in elected members showing political leadership. All right, not mucking around. And frankly, I'm really glad that the transport portfolio is back on the table, of which public transport is a very important component. And Russ, I commend your political leadership over the years, as I do Dave's. An interesting analogy, I guess, one of the greatest public transport places in the world is Germany. But they also have the the autobahns. They have the integrated, they have the best tram, cities of equivalent size of Hamilton in Germany, would have the combo of the mini trams. You'd bund onto a low-speed metro service. You'd have a high-speed rail pretty close by. You'd be on the off-ramp to an autobahn, etc. So I think kind of Hamilton would have that parallel. And if we look just across the Tasman, the city of Ipswich, very progressive council, doing a lot of CBD development. What do you note about Ipswich is you go into downtown Ipswich and you go down a ramp and you're on the train that is a commuter train that takes you to central Brisbane and to Sunshine Coast, etc. You also have a motorway an expressway up to Brisbane as well. I know they're slightly closer together. They have an integrated public transport system, and one of the challenges, in my view, is to join that AT card, which you can get, with a WT or a Waikato card. So we want to see in the future where you can pay a price and you get one card, and that gives you buses, train to Auckland, and then all of the Auckland train, ferry, the lot, you know, at a certain price. And I think you talked about competitive advantage with Taronga. Our competitive advantage is our proximity to super city Auckland, but also our ability to develop a very comprehensive transport network, and it's all there for the taking. The big financial challenge for us, Mr. Chair, is things like getting the platform at the base. A financial challenge, I think, and a challenge with regional council is how do we better improve the link with our major commuter towns, Morrinsville, Cambridge, Tiamutu. You know, these are the towns where, in some cases, certainly Tiamutu and Morrinsville, where the first homeowner, the first home, the affordable home, may be at Kihikihi. So we've got to be really clear about how people kind of can use a bus to, say, get their job at the inland port at Horatu, Ruakura in downtown Hamilton. So those are the big picture things that obviously we work closely with regional council in the future to do. But I want to commend, actually, and you look at that graph there, where there was a big steep rise. I want to say to colleagues simply this: that graph and that steep rise, the 100%, was it, Councillor McPherson or more, former Mayor Remington, was for one reason and one reason alone, and that was focused political leadership in this chamber and over at the Regional Council. And if you want that graph to get back on track, is please make sure that we have dedicated political leadership, which we have. And secondly, we have to play hardball, obviously, in a nicest possible way, to the government of the day to get those transport solutions that we need. And if we have a good transport system, public-private, in the Greater Hamilton, Central Waikato area, that does give us a huge competitive advantage as a city.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And may I remind you that this is actually the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, not the Transport Committee.
Look, it's got the other name. With respect, point of order.
Okay, no, ruled out.
The Mayor should have put transport in it as well, but it is transport, of course it is.
Thank you. Okay, I'll put the resolution. Show of hands, I think, is easiest. Those in favour, against. Eh? Yeah, you can if you like, Russ. You always used to get the Chief Executive to vote anyway. One against is Councillor Mallett.
No, it's mine now.
Okay, that motion's carried. Want to break for lunch now until, let's say, 1:35. It's 5 to 2 now, so a 40-minute break, if that's okay. Thanks very much. We'll come straight back. Probably, we'll work out where we're coming back to. Yeah.
And Councillor McPherson, thanks for the questions and the way in which this whole chamber has shown a great interest and the courtesy you've displayed to our team as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Still.